Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 3 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as Rasa of the Sand and brought greatness to the Sand Village. Let the tale begin. Chapter 51, Clouds and Stones Reaction. When Rasa actually used the chakra fruit to cultivate a god tree, subtle yet significant changes began rippling through the shinobi world. The official missives sent by Sunagakure's Umbu to Iwagakure and Kumogakure had already reached the desks of two of the most powerful figures, Inoki, the third Otsutsuki of Iwagakure, and Ae, the third Raikage of Kumogakure. Inoki was the first to receive the letter. Despite his typically composed and pragmatic demeanor, his face darkened as he scanned the contents. That Fourth Kazekage, he's nothing but a shameless brat. Since Inoki's son, Akatsuki, was busy leading on the front lines, his trusted subordinate, Kurobachi, had been assisting him in handling internal matters. And, the author initially used 2 chi, which wasn't in the original anime or manga. I swapped it for Kurobachi, who appeared in the anime. What's wrong, Otsutsuki-sama? How did Sunagakure respond? Kurobachi asked cautiously, to which, without a word, Inoki tossed the scroll over. Kurobachi unrolled it and began reading, his expression twisting in indignation. This is outrageous. The Fourth Kazekage expects us, Iwagakure, to foot their war expenses? And the amount they're demanding, this is pure lunacy. Inoki let out a derisive snort. The excuses outlined in the letter, claiming the newly appointed Fourth Kazekage was still stabilizing the village, didn't even concern him. If anything, it amused him. Kurobachi, what do you think we should do in response? Inoki asked, testing his subordinate, and Kurobachi answered without hesitation. For Sunagakure to dare send such an audacious demand, they must assume we're too preoccupied with our war against Sunagakure to retaliate. They believe we're stretched too thin. What they don't realize is that we've been holding back. And it's clear this message wasn't just sent to us, it's highly likely the third Raikage received an identical letter. With his temper, there's no chance he'll tolerate this insult. Inoki raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh? Then what are you suggesting? Kurobachi's eyes gleamed as he laid out his plan. This could be our chance to ally with Kumogakure. The war has dragged on long enough, and Sunagakure is already on the brink of collapse. They're only surviving because of a few key individuals holding the village together. If we join forces with Kumogakure, we can overwhelm Sunagakure's remaining defenses in one decisive strike and march straight to the daimyo's palace. Inoki gave Kurobachi an approving nod. Not a bad plan. But just as Kurobachi started to feel a glimmer of satisfaction, Inoki added with a weighty tone. However, you're underestimating Sunagakure. Inoki's voice carried the wisdom of a man who had seen the unimaginable. Having witnessed the terrifying might of Madara Uchiha firsthand, he knew Sunagakure's strength ran far deeper than most could fathom. Kurobachi furrowed his brows, clearly puzzled. On the battlefield, both Kumogakure and Iwagakure had already made significant advances into the Land of Fire. Sunagakure had been dealt blow after blow, their forces pushed all the way back to the daimyo's estate. Yet, despite their apparent crumbling defenses, the Otsutsuki still seemed wary of them. At this moment, Inoki spoke again, his tone decisive. Do as you suggested. Send a letter to Kumogakure in my name. There's no need to explicitly propose an alliance. Raikage is a cautious man and will grow suspicious, but cooperation is still achievable. For example, that brat from Sunagakure needs to be taught a proper lesson. Kurobachi quickly grasped the intent behind Inoki's words. He hesitated momentarily before asking. Should we deploy ninjas directly from the village or pull reinforcements from the front lines? Inoki pondered the question for a moment before replying. The war has dragged on for over a month now. It's time to let the frontline troops rest and rotate fresh forces in. Have Akatsuki leave the demolition team to replace the current unit. As for the ninjas returning from the front lines, you will take charge and lead them to Sunagakure. And recall Rashi as well. Have him accompany you on this mission. The mention of Rashi didn't escape Kurobachi's notice. It was no secret within Iwagakure that the Four-Tails Jinchuriki, Rashi, had a rocky relationship with Inoki. Allowing Rashi to grow too influential within the village was something that Tsukikage was keen to avoid. I understand. Should we aim only to intimidate them, or? Inoki let out a derisive snort, his expression cold. That depends entirely on how well that brat from Sunagakure behaves. If he dares to act out of line, then a small punishment will be in order. Kurobachi immediately caught the subtext behind his words and smirked. Understood. I'll begin arrangements and contact Kumogakure without delay. Boom! At the front line between Kumogakure and Konoha, a deafening sound echoed through the command tent as the third Raikage, AE, slammed his fist against the table. Not long ago, the third Raikage had received Sunagakure's official letter, and the contents left him livid. His chakra flared uncontrollably, filling the tent with an oppressive aura that sent a shiver down the spines of everyone present. That insolent little brat. The overwhelming surge of power startled everyone in the room. Father, are you all right? What did Sunagakure say to anger you so much? I, the future fourth Raikage, stepping forward in concern. The third Raikage wordlessly handed the scroll to the others in the tent. I snatched it up and read through it quickly. By the time he finished, his own fury was evident in the tight set of his jaw and the faint sparks crackling around his clenched fists. That weak Fourth Kazekage actually expects us to cover their war expenses? And the amount, they've got to be out of their minds. Darui, standing to the side, took a more measured approach. After reading the scroll, he calmly commented. Raikage-sama, it seems the Fourth Kazekage isn't as clever as we thought. This demand borders on delusional. I was at a loss for words, though the twitch in his eyebrow betrayed his frustration. What do we do now, father? The third Raikage's response was simple but firm. We wait. Wait? Everyone in the room looked at him in confusion. The third Raikage elaborated his wisdom as the Raikage. Inoki, that crafty old fox, must have received the same letter from Sunagakure. There's no way he'll let this slide. We're not going to let Kumogakure act alone on this. Let him make the first move. His reasoning was sound. And sure enough, that very afternoon, a letter from Iwagakure's Umbu arrived at the Kumogakure front line, confirming his suspicions. Father, your prediction was spot on. I said, a note of admiration in his voice. The third Raikage's lips curved into a faint smile at the compliment. You do well to think more rationally, I. Strength is important, but it takes foresight to win a war. I fell silent, unable to argue with his father's words. While unrolling the scroll, the third Raikage remarked with a knowing smile. After all these years as rivals, there's no way Inoki could ever hide his intentions from me. The moment his eyes scanned the contents of the scroll, his mind had already begun crafting a plan. Let the ninjas at the front line rest for now. Adopt a defensive stance. Darui, go to the village and bring Toroi here. Darui blinked in surprise at the command but nodded without hesitation. Understood. I'll see to it immediately. Meanwhile, I, the future fourth Raikage, couldn't hold back his confusion. Father, why are we doing this? We're so close to completely crushing Konoha forces. So close? The third Raikage's voice was calm, yet a hint of steel underlined his words. He turned to I, his gaze firm, like that of a teacher preparing to pass down an important lesson. As a leader, and more importantly, as a father, he felt it was crucial to impart some truths to his heir. Open your eyes, I, and think carefully. Right now, we're at a stalemate with Konoha. On the surface, it might seem like they're barely holding on, but this is the land of fire. Their reinforcements can arrive in mere hours, while it takes us at least 2 days to bring ours from the village. And then there's the matter of the quality of their ninjas. The third Raikage's fist tightened as he spoke, the sound of his knuckles cracking filling the tent with an almost ominous weight. Few in his generation understood Konoha true strength as well as he did. It wasn't just about their current forces, it was about their endless capacity to produce talent. Their shinobi weren't just numerous, they were formidable, disciplined, and relentless. If the battle dragged on much longer, Kumogakure would inevitably exhaust its resources and manpower. This was why the Third Raikage had already decided on a different approach. To secure victory, it would take more than brute force. They would need to act decisively, uniting with Sunagakure and Iwagakure to overwhelm Konogakure in one swift, coordinated blow. Turning to Darui, he issued his next command with unyielding resolve. Since Inoki has already deployed his Jinchuriki, we cannot afford to fall behind. Darui, bring Yujito here as well. She and Toroi will follow your lead. Take them to meet with Iwagakure's forces. Your mission is simple: make that young Kazekage from Sunagakure understand the true state of the shinobi world. Darui's eyes sharpened as he absorbed the order. He gave a firm nod. Understood, Raikage-sama. The Third Raikage's logic was sound. With the combined power of two Jinchuriki, there would be no question of Sunagakure's compliance. The Fourth Kazekage might be ambitious, but even he couldn't stand against the might of Kumogakure and Iwagakure working in tandem. Darui left without hesitation, his mind already focused on the task ahead. He knew one thing for certain: the presence of both Yujito and Toroi would send an unmistakable message to the Fourth Kazekage. Chapter 52, Turbulence. The sudden shift in activity between Kumogakure and Iwagakure did not escape the watchful eyes of Konogakure, which was still locked in a fierce battle against them. Neither Kumogakure nor Iwagakure had made any effort to conceal their troop movements. Their actions were observed and reported in meticulous detail by Konogakure's Umbu, who had been closely monitoring the battlefield. By now, both Kumogakure and Iwagakure forces had deeply penetrated the Land of Fire. As a result, Konohagakure had been forced to shrink its defensive lines. While this contraction was a setback, it also allowed the high-ranking commanders from both fronts to consolidate their forces, enabling their troops to provide mutual reinforcement. This unified strategy was one of the main reasons Konohagakure had managed to withstand such a sustained and overwhelming assault. Inside Konohagakure's command tent, the tension was palpable. Seated around the table were the Third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, alongside Danzo, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, Minato Namikaze, Hayashi Hyuga, the leaders of the Ino Shikacho trio, and Shibi Aburame. This rare gathering of Konohagakure's elite underscored the dire situation the village faced. The fatigue etched on their faces told the story of a month-long campaign that had pushed even the strongest to their limits. As the group reviewed the latest developments, Shibi Aburame, ever the precise and efficient intelligence officer, began his report. Using the observations gathered by his insects, he detailed the troop movements of both Kumogakure and Iwagakure. The Third Hokage, clad in his black combat attire, listened intently. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke. So, in terms of key combatants, the only noteworthy withdrawals appear to be Iwagakure's Four Tails Jinchuriki and Kumogakure's Darui. Is that correct? Shibi nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. However, according to our sources, Iwagakure's demolition squad, led by the infamous explosive release user Gari, is already en route to the front lines. The absence of the Four Tails Jinchuriki won't significantly weaken Iwagakure's capabilities. If anything, their ranks may grow more cohesive. Hiruzen nodded slowly, processing the information. It seems our situation remains precarious. Danzo seized the chance to interject. Why don't we take advantage of this confusion to strike back at Kumogakure and Iwagakure while their forces are in flux? Shikaku Nara, who had been managing the frontline operations, let out a weary sigh. At this stage, our forces are far too drained to launch a successful counteroffensive. Our ninjas need rest, and both Kumogakure and Iwagakure will undoubtedly be on high alert. Any attack we mount now is likely to fail and cost us dearly. Danzo's eyes narrowed in frustration, but they remained silent for the moment. Breaking the brief lull, Jiraiya leaned forward. Have we confirmed the reason for these sudden changes in their front lines? Inoichi Yamanaka, the group's expert in intelligence gathering, nodded. Yes. Based on the information we've collected, their movements suggest that their target is Sunagakure. Sunagakure? The revelation shocked nearly everyone in the tent. Eyes widened, and a low murmur rippled through the room. Just weeks ago, Sunagakure had humiliated Konoha by stealing priceless treasures, leaving them scrambling to respond. The daimyos were still pressuring Konoha to launch a campaign against Sunagakure to reclaim the stolen artifacts. Danzo's expression, however, darkened considerably. His hatred for Sunagakure burned hotter than ever. The fiasco with Sunagakure had left his influence in the village weakened, forcing him to remain on the front lines instead of returning to the village to consolidate his power. Danzo knew with absolute certainty that he had never acted against Sunagakure's Third Kazekage. But at this point, that detail was irrelevant. What truly mattered was how the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure had uncovered the secret of his arm. Over the past few days, Danzo had meticulously scrutinized every individual privy to the knowledge of his arm's secret. Yet, none of them seemed likely to have leaked the information, not even Orochimaru. The tension around Danzo was obvious and everyone in the tent could feel it. Yet, despite the oppressive atmosphere, no one dared to address the matter directly. There were larger, more pressing issues at hand, and Danzo's personal concerns would have to wait. Orochimaru, however, stood apart from the others, wearing a peculiar smile that made those around him uneasy. The third Hokage, sensing the growing stagnation in the room, decided it was time to refocus the conversation. Do we have any idea why Kumogakure and Iwagakure are mobilizing against Sunagakure? Inoichi Yamanaka stepped forward. It appears that Kumogakure and Iwagakure attempted to form an alliance with Sunagakure but were turned down. The revelation left everyone stunned. Noticing the skepticism on their faces, Inoichi quickly elaborated, trying to provide more context. This information was directly released by Sunagakure itself. The room fell into a tense silence. The reasoning was baffling, and yet, it seemed deliberately calculated. While no one could fully understand Sunagakure's motives, one thing was certain: the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure was not someone to take lightly. Both Konoha and the Land of Fire had already paid dearly for underestimating him. After a pause, Danzo seized the opportunity to put forth his suggestion. In that case, why don't we use this chance to strike Sunagakure as well? Daimyo has been pressuring us to take action for some time now. Hiruzen, the third Hokage, appeared momentarily intrigued by the idea. But after a brief consideration, he shook his head. No. If we move against Sunagakure now, regardless of the outcome, we'll likely drive them straight into the arms of Kumogakure and Iwagakure. That would leave us fighting on 3 fronts instead of 2. The daimyo's demands must be met, but this is not the right moment. Our immediate priority is to resolve the current 2-front war. If we can force either Kumogakure or Iwagakure to retreat, it will significantly ease the strain on Konoha. The reality was simple: Konoha had never feared facing a single village in open combat. But handling 2 major powers at once was stretching their resources and morale to the brink. Shikaku Nara nodded in agreement. That's true, but with the way things stand, it's going to be an uphill battle. Any move we make against one side will almost certainly draw the other into action. They'll seize the chance to press their advantage. The grim logic of Shikaku's words made the deadlock feel even more suffocating. Just as the room fell silent again, Danzo spoke up with another bold and divisive suggestion. Then let's unleash the Nine Tails on the battlefield. With its immense power, we could. Before he could finish, Minato Namikaze, who had been quiet until now, rose abruptly. No. Danzo-san, Kushina has not yet gained full control over the Nine Tails. Sending her into battle now would be reckless. Humph. Danzo's expression darkened, and his gaze turned icy. The purpose of a Jinchuriki is to serve as a weapon for the tailed beasts. Now is the time for Kushina to prove her worth. Minato, however, didn't flinch. His response, steady and firm, carried a weight that silenced the murmurs in the tent. No, Danzo-san. Uncontrolled power isn't just a threat to the enemy, it's a danger to our own forces as well. I don't believe bringing Kushina to the battlefield is a wise decision. Danzo's expression darkened as Minato repeatedly challenged him. Frustration and anger began to seep into his tone. "Minato, are you defying my authority as an elder?" Minato, unfazed, met Danzo's glare with an unusual coldness. "With all due respect, Danzo-san, this is a battlefield, not the village. Here, I'm the supreme commander of the Iwagakure front. Only the Hokage has the authority to countermand my decisions. To be precise, even you, Danzo-san, are under my command here." The tension in the room soared as Danzo's face twisted into an expression of icy fury. His gaze locked on Minato, but the younger man didn't waver, meeting his stare with a calm yet resolute confidence. The oppressive silence in the tent was finally broken by the third Hokage's cold tone. "Enough, Danzo. Kushina is not up for discussion anymore." The Hokage's command brought an abrupt end to the heated exchange, leaving Danzo visibly seething. After a moment, he let out a bitter chuckle, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Jiraiya, you've certainly raised a fine student." Jiraiya, unfazed by the insult, grinned and gave Minato an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "Yeah, I'd say I did a pretty good job," he replied, his laughter cutting through the tension. Danzo rose slowly, his movements deliberate and his demeanor icy. "If there's no room for my input here, I'll return to the village." Humph. With that, Danzo turned and left, his footsteps heavy with irritation. As he exited, the unease in the tent lingered. Most of the gathered shinobi exchanged uncertain glances, but no one dared to speak out. The third Hokage's silent contemplation only deepened the discomfort. Only Shikaku seemed to grasp the deeper implications of Danzo's departure. He reasoned that with the village's current instability, Danzo's return might actually help suppress rumors and keep the Uchiha clan in check. Meanwhile, far to the west, Sunagakure's intelligence network had also picked up on the movements of Kumogakure and Iwagakure. Word quickly spread within the village, an attack was coming. Chapter 53, Desert Miracle. On the streets of Sunagakure. Not long after Sunagakure's successful raid on the Land of Fire and the reforms led by Rasa, both the village's ninjas and its civilians found their pockets significantly heavier. With the expansion of the Ninja Academy, the construction of hospitals, and the establishment of orphanages, Sunagakure started to show signs of flourishing development. The shops that lined the streets showcased an array of exquisite items, valuable jewelry, beautiful fabrics, and finely crafted clothing. These goods had been looted from the nobles of the Land of Fire during Sunagakure's raid. For a ninja village, such items had little practical use, so Rasa gave the task of managing them to Maki. Once Maki received the order, he wasted no time getting to work. Most of the items were meant to be sold to the nobles of the Wind Country, though a small portion was set aside for the village's merchants, who would handle the selling of those goods. At one of the clothing stores along the street, Kurura, the wife of Sunagakure's Kazekage, and Saramu, the queen of Roran, were trying on stunning dresses. It had been 3 days since Saramu's arrival in Sunagakure. In fact, she had already received word from Rasa that Sunagakure had agreed to Roran's integration on the very morning she arrived, but she had chosen not to return immediately. Instead, she wanted to spend some time familiarizing herself with the village, observing how it planned to settle her people. Saramu was a sharp and insightful woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to rise to power as the ruler of Roran. She understood that building a solid relationship with Kurura, the Kazekage's wife, would be key in ensuring the villagers of Sunagakure accepted her people in the future. Saramu was clever, but so was Kurura. Although Kurura appeared gentle and innocent, like a young girl who hadn't seen much of the world, it was important to remember that she was, in fact, a Jonin of Sunagakure. At a young age, she had been involved in the second Kazekage's experiments with sand control techniques. There was no way she could be as naive as she seemed. Understanding Saramu's intentions, Kurura didn't push her away but welcomed her approach. Already married to Rasa, Kurura also hoped to support her husband's plans. Before long, the two of them emerged from the store, both wearing long, flowing dresses in Sunagakure's signature style, simple yet graceful. Scarves draped around their necks shielded them from the sand. In the 3 days Saramu had spent in Sunagakure, she had gained a general sense of the village. How should she describe it? It was quite different from the menacing ninjas she had initially encountered. The villagers of Sunagakure came across as humble and unpretentious. Perhaps because of the village's scarcity of resources, the people didn't indulge in extravagant fashions. The entire village lived modestly, from their simple clothing to their basic meals. Even Karura, the wife of the Kazekage, dressed in a way that reflected the practicality of the village. Her clothes were few and simple, much like the rest of the villagers. Yet, despite their modesty, there was a noticeable sense of contentment. The smiles on the faces of the women and children made it clear that the villagers were happy with their lives. It seems like the people of Sunagakure are really happy with their lives, Saramu remarked as she strolled alongside Karura, her gaze following the smiles on the villagers' faces. Karura's expression softened into a proud smile as she responded. It's because of Rasa-kun. Thanks to him, everyone can live such a happy life. Over the past 3 days, Saramu had heard various stories about the recent events between Sunagakure and Konoha. Though, from her own perspective, the idea of plundering other countries seemed somewhat immoral, it appeared to be a common practice among ninja villages. At that moment, 3 adorable children came running over, excitedly calling out to Karura. Karura-sama. Oh, it's Mori, Angie, and Ro, you 3? Karura greeted, a warm smile on her face. Saramu was a little surprised to see Karura recognizing and greeting the children by name. The children, thrilled that Karura remembered them, became even more excited. One bold little girl grabbed onto Karura's skirt with a smile. Karura-sama, we want to show you something. Is that okay? Of course, little Angie. Karura replied, gently ruffling the girl's hair. She glanced at Saramu and gave a slight gesture for her to follow. Saramu nodded and fell in line behind the children. After a short walk, the group arrived at a small building. Karura knew this was one of the village's wells, strategically placed around the village so that the villagers could easily access water. As Karura and Saramu wondered what had brought the children to this spot, Angie, the little girl, excitedly pointed toward the side of the well house and exclaimed, Karura-sama, hurry and look! It's grass! So much grass! Grass! Karura blinked in confusion, her eyes following Angie's outstretched finger. Her surprise grew as she saw what the girl was pointing at. Beside the well, in the cracks between the stone floor, a small patch of grass had sprouted, its vibrant green standing out starkly against the surrounding yellowish sand. What is this? Karura murmured in disbelief, walking forward a few steps to crouch down. She gently touched the grass, her fingers trembling slightly as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. The 3 children eagerly explained. Karura-sama, this grass grew yesterday. And it's not just here. We checked, and other wells in the village have small patches of grass growing too. The villagers say this is Kazekage-sama's miracle. A miracle! Karura was momentarily stunned by the word, her eyes widening in surprise. But she quickly regained her composure, standing up with a soft smile as she gently patted the children's heads. Well, you must protect this grass well, all right? Hi! The children eagerly responded. After comforting the children, Karura and Saramu left the good house together. Saramu, clearly deep in thought after what she had just witnessed, glanced at Karura's gentle expression and tentatively asked, Does Rasa often stay away from home for long periods like this? Karura shot her a curious look, instantly picking up on the fact that Saramu was thinking about something but didn't want to directly voice her concern. Could it have something to do with the grass they had just seen? With a knowing smile, Karura sighed. Rasa-kun is the Kazekage of the village, he bears all the responsibility for the village's well-being. Although Karura didn't elaborate further, Saramu understood the implication and sighed, her voice carrying a tinge of melancholy. I see. When I was in Roran, I was often too caught up in matters of state and neglected little Sarah. I never really got to experience the life of an ordinary woman like this. Hearing this, Karura smiled warmly, her eyes softening. Well, then I'll be sure to give you a proper tour, Saramu-sama. Just as the two women were about to continue their walk, Kurura suddenly stopped and looked up, sensing something. Saramu, intrigued, followed Kurura's gaze but saw nothing. However, the frown on Kurura's face gave her a strange sense of unease that she couldn't quite explain. Before Saramu could speak, an ANBU ninja appeared in front of them in a blur. Kurura-sama, Saramu-sama, Kazekage-sama requests your presence. Chapter 54, War is Coming. The village's high-ranking officials had gathered in the Kazekage's office within the Kazekage Tower. Present were Rasa, Chio, Ebizo, Pakura, Michikawa, Baki, and several other senior ninjas from Sunagakure. Everyone was listening intently as an ANBU ninja station below relayed the latest report. Reporting to Kazekage-sama, according to confirmation from the ANBU in the Land of Birds, the vanguard from Iwagakure has already entered the country. The leader of the group is the Jinchuriki of the Four Tails from Iwagakure. Meanwhile, Kumogakure has started moving towards the Land of Wind by sea. Their leader is the elite ninja, Darui, along with the Two Tails Jinchuriki. If all goes as planned, they should reach our coastline in about 2 days. The daimyo has already begun urging us to prepare for battle. A tense silence settled over the room. Unlike Konoha, Sunagakure lacked the strength to face invasions from 2 major ninja villages simultaneously. On top of that, both Iwagakure and Kumogakure had deployed their tailed beasts for the assault. However, in stark contrast to the grim mood of the room, Rasa remained calm and spoke with an air of lightness. So, you're telling me that Kumogakure and Iwagakure are teaming up? Their first target is actually us, Sunagakure? Pakura's voice broke through the tension, cold and sharp. It seems, Kazekage-sama, your plan has failed? Rasa shook his head, unfazed. No. This actually shows that Iwagakure and Kumogakure are desperately in need of our help to break the deadlock. That's why they're using such grand tactics to try to intimidate us. So, you're saying Kumogakure and Iwagakure don't actually want to fight us? Michikawa asked, thoughtfully. Rasa's response was firm and resolute. Of course not. Putting aside the current situation, what would Kumogakure and Iwagakure gain by fighting us? And if they truly wanted war, why would they be so vocal about it? How else could our ANBU have learned about the Two Tails Jinchuriki being mobilized? Ebizo nodded in agreement. Kazekage-sama is right. We only knew that Kumogakure had successfully created a Jinchuriki for the Eight Tails. If they hadn't voluntarily exposed the Two Tails Jinchuriki, we'd have been completely caught off guard. Ebizo's words brought a collective sigh of relief from the others in the room. If Kumogakure truly intended to launch a surprise attack on Sunagakure, they wouldn't have leaked such crucial information. So what do we do now? Pakura asked, her tone steady but inquisitive. The plan remains unchanged. Whether it's Konoha or Kumogakure and Iwagakure, as long as it's a battlefield, it's an opportunity for our ninjas to prove themselves. The only thing that changes is the enemy. Pakura, I'll leave Iwagakure to you. The Four Tails Jinchuriki's lava release is similar to your scorch release. Pakura's eyes sparked with interest. Lava release, huh? No problem. I've been wanting to face a Jinchuriki. Especially now that she had mastered Star Release Chakra, greatly increasing her chakra capacity, and developed new techniques for her Scorch Release Chakra. Rasa continued, turning to Michikawa. As for Kumogakure, I'll leave that to you. No problem. Michikawa responded confidently. Seeing both of them agree, Rasa nodded and issued his final instructions. Our strategy remains the same. As long as the ninjas from Kumogakure and Iwagakure don't cross the borders of the Land of Wind, let them stir up trouble. You all just need to hold the front line. If they want Sunagakure to assist them in attacking Konoha, they'll have to offer us something in return. Baki, send out the ANBU to gather intelligence. While supporting Michikawa and Pakura, we can't neglect Konoha. We need to be prepared for a counterattack. Understood, Kazekage-sama. Baki responded. With the meeting progressing smoothly, Pakura, curious about Rasa's own role. What about you, Kazekage-sama? Rasa glanced at her calmly and answered. As for me, I'll remain here in the village, ready to provide support at any time. It's not yet time for full-scale combat, so I shouldn't be leading the front lines just yet. The plan to raid the Land of Fire had been initiated when Rasa, newly appointed Kazekage, needed to solidify his position and gain the prestige of leading such a mission. But now, with his position firmly secured, it would be unwise for him to leave the village and risk exposing Sunagakure's internal vulnerabilities. More importantly, despite Rasa's acquisition of the Dragon Vein Chakra through the Kama Seal, he still hadn't mastered its full potential due to the limited time he had been able to study it. To put it simply, Rasa had the chakra but not the techniques to wield it to its fullest. What was ninjutsu, to Rasa? It was the most efficient means to use chakra to defeat an opponent. At present, Rasa's chakra is divided into 3 types: Shikaku Chakra, Star Release Chakra, and Dragon Vein Chakra. Of these, Shikaku Chakra was the easiest for Rasa to utilize, thanks to his inherited connection to Sunagakure's magnet release and the second Kazekage's research, not to mention Gaara's techniques. Rasa could effortlessly use a variety of techniques with this chakra. Star Release Chakra's ability was straightforward. It activated the physical limits of the user's body, meaning that even its basic mode was highly effective. However, Dragon Vein Chakra, whether for techniques like inorganic reincarnation, material transformation, ultra-speed regeneration, or chakra absorption, each of these abilities could potentially be developed into a unique bloodline limit. This was why Rasa didn't want to waste the potential of Dragon Vein Chakra. He planned to use his position as Kazekage and his knowledge to develop a series of techniques that would best utilize these 4 abilities. At the same time, he wanted to understand Dragon Vein Chakra more deeply, hoping that one day he could teach it to others in Sunagakure, just like Sage Mode. Rasa had studied the God Tree born from the Dragon Vein Chakra fruit for several days, but aside from observing some minor environmental changes around Sunagakure, he hadn't yet figured out what the God Tree truly did or whether it was linked to the Ten Tails. With time running short, Rasa had to put his research on the God Tree on hold and focus on further developing the Dragon Vein Chakra for now. After an hour of intense discussion about how to respond to the looming threat from Kumogakure and Iwagakure, the group had devised a rough plan. Thanks to Rasa's calm confidence and composure, the atmosphere in the room had settled, and the initial panic had subsided. Remember, our objective remains unchanged. Our goal has never been war. We're simply trying to buy time and space for the village to develop. Now, let's move forward with the plan. Everyone, go prepare. Rasa declared, his voice steady but resolute. Yes. The team responded in unison, each member quickly leaving the room. Soon, the office was empty, and a heavy silence settled in. At that moment, Baki entered with 2 individuals behind him. Kazekage-sama, Lady Karura and Lady Saramu have arrived. Let them in. Rasa replied, his attention momentarily shifting to the visitors. With curiosity in their eyes, Karura and Saramu entered the room. Rasa gestured for them to sit down, his tone immediately softening as he addressed Saramu. My apologies, Saramu. The welcoming of the Roran citizens into Sunagakure will have to be postponed for now. Saramu nodded, understanding that there were more pressing matters at hand. In fact, the 2 women had already noticed a group of ninjas, including Pakura and Shio, leading the Kazekage's office. They had exchanged brief greetings with them, but it was clear that something serious was unfolding. Karura, sensing the situation, turned to Rasa and asked on behalf of Saramu, her voice tinged with concern. Is war about to begin again? Chapter 55, Technique Development, Part 1. Maybe. Rasa didn't hold anything back. The forces from Kumogakure and Iwagakure are heading toward the Land of Wind's border. It's looking like things might not stay calm for much longer. Saramu had already expected this, but the uncertainty surrounding the ninja world still made her uneasy. Thankfully, Rasa offered reassurance. Don't worry. It won't turn into an all-out war. Kumogakure and Iwagakure are just trying to intimidate us. As for the Roran citizens joining Sunagakure, we'll stick to the original plan, though the welcoming ceremony might need to be postponed for now. Saramu understood Rasa's apology and exhaled slowly. It's fine. I've already made my choice, so I understand the price that comes with it. I see. Rasa nodded, then glanced between his wife and Saramu, both of whom seemed to have gotten along well. After a brief pause, he spoke again. Here's the plan, Saramu. I can see you and Karura have developed a strong rapport. Karura, you're someone I trust, so I'll leave the matter of the Roran citizens joining Sunagakure in your hands. Feel free to tell Karura anything you need. I trust her to manage it well. Both Karura and Saramu were taken aback. However, while Karura was genuinely surprised, Saramu was pleasantly surprised. Saramu understood that, as outsiders, the Roran citizens would face numerous challenges in adjusting to an unfamiliar village. Having Rasa's wife help them would alleviate many potential problems. Through their interactions over the past few days, Saramu had come to appreciate Karura's gentle and easygoing nature. Rasa's decision was a clear show of goodwill toward the Roran citizens, and it eased some of Saramu's concerns about the impending conflict. After marrying Rasa, Karura had intended to focus more on domestic matters, taking care of the home and raising children. She hadn't expected Rasa to assign her such an important task. Yet, she didn't refuse. She could sense her husband's trust in her and understood the deeper strategic reasons behind his decision. Rasa had his reasons for this move. First, it was to reassure Saramu and the Roran citizens. Second, given the shortage of talent in Sunagakure, it would be a waste to let an experienced jonin like Karura become a housewife. Although he hesitated to send her into the battlefield, within the village, she would be just fine. Finally, Rasa intended to create a Roran faction within the village, helping to balance the power dynamics between the aristocratic and commoner factions in Sunagakure. When Rasa finished speaking, Saramu immediately turned to Karura. Karura, I'll be counting on you from here on out. Do you really think I can handle it? Karura asked with uncertainty in her voice. Of course. Rasa reassured her confidently. As the Kazekage, I'm making this decision. I'll make sure the ANBU supports you. I understand. With Rasa's encouragement, Karura accepted the responsibility, her cheeks flushed. But after a moment, she shook her head, suddenly becoming serious. Have the Roran citizens been given a place in the village? Rasa smiled and nodded. Yes, it'll be in the area around the Sand Temple. Karura's eyes lit up as she quickly grasped Rasa's reasoning. As someone who had once been a test subject for the Shikaku chakra, Karura knew exactly what the Sand Temple was. That area had remained abandoned for years due to concerns about potential rampages by Shikaku. However, after more than a decade, Shikaku was long gone. Choosing this location would not only prevent interference with the other villagers' interests but also provide a suitable living area for the Roran citizens. Karura nodded thoughtfully. That's actually a good choice. But it's been empty for so long that it probably needs some repairs. Hearing Karura confirm that the location was a good one, Saramu felt a sense of relief. Rasa continued. That's why I'll leave the repairs to you, and the village will cover the costs. Just make sure it's signed off by me when the time comes. Currently, Sunagakure was focused on showcasing its financial strength. Alright, I'll take Saramu to check it out now, Karura said. Rasa nodded, granting them permission to leave. Karura and Saramu headed out. Karura didn't bring up the matter of the well house. Despite being the Kazekage's wife, she had once been a jonin herself and knew that there were certain boundaries to be respected as a ninja. If something was important for her to know, Rasa would tell her. If it wasn't, she understood she shouldn't pry. As Kazekage, Rasa was fully aware of any changes related to the well house. Rasa, of course, knew about it but chose not to say much. He didn't want to draw too much attention to the village's internal changes, especially concerning the existence of the god tree. After Karura and Saramu left, Rasa stayed behind, leaving a clone to handle some of the village matters. Meanwhile, his main body took control of the gold dust cloud and soared into the vast, barren desert to continue developing techniques related to the Dragon Vein chakra. On the yellow sands, Rasa joined his hands, beginning to sense the Dragon Vein energy in the surrounding natural world. No. To be more precise, it should be called Dragon Vein energy. Since Rasa had never learned Sage Mode, he wasn't sure if Dragon Vein energy was fundamentally different from the natural energy used in Sage techniques. To avoid any confusion, he decided to refer to it as Dragon Vein energy. This was the ability Rasa had gained through the Kama Seal, which allowed him to perceive and absorb Dragon Vein energy from the natural world, a crucial step in using Dragon Vein chakra. However, during this process, his body didn't undergo the typical changes seen in the three great Sage lands or Hashirama Sage Mode, such as the appearance of Sage Mode's eye patterns or any physical transformations. To be more precise, Rasa didn't notice any significant changes in his body, so he chose not to call it Sage Mode, but rather Dragon Vein Mode. Perhaps due to the Kama Seal directly altering his physical constitution, Rasa found that he could activate Dragon Vein Mode instantly. Furthermore, while in this mode, he could continue absorbing Dragon Vein energy, meaning there was no time limit on the mode. However, just like with the natural energy in Sage Mode, the amount of Dragon Vein energy his body could store was limited over time. It had to be balanced with the mental and physical energy within his body. After several days of research, Rasa had managed to determine the energy ratio. It wasn't the usual 1:1:1 ratio found in Sage Mode, but rather 1 hour 1 minute 0.5 seconds. This meant that for every unit of mental and physical energy, only half a unit of Dragon Vein energy could be used. When Rasa entered Dragon Vein Mode, the three energies blended together in this proportion to form the unique Dragon Vein chakra. Abilities such as inorganic reincarnation, metamorphosis, rapid self-healing, and chakra absorption all came from the Dragon Vein chakra. So, to be precise, Rasa didn't gain all these abilities from the Kama Seal itself. The Kama Seal only granted him the ability to perceive and absorb Dragon Vein energy and enter Dragon Vein Mode. All the other abilities stem from the powers granted by the Dragon Vein chakra. Chapter 56, Technique Development, Part 2, Dragon Vein, Shikaku's Avatar. With a deafening roar, Shikaku's avatar emerged above the endless desert. Thanks to the Dragon Vein chakra, the changes to the adder were immediately noticeable. First, the once rough texture of sand grains covering its surface had vanished, replaced by smooth, skin-like skin. This was the true power of Dragon Vein chakra, the ability to reshape and transform materials. The chakra had fused all the individual grains of sand into a unified form. Though it might seem trivial, this transformation meant that Shikaku's avatar was no longer vulnerable to water release techniques. By merging the sand into a solid mass, the gaps between grains were eliminated, preventing water from seeping through. This made the sand heavier, fortifying Shikaku's body against attacks and stopping any erosion or weakening from water-based techniques. Additionally, the combined form gave the avatar much greater durability. The sand had now turned into something resembling hard rock, providing far more defense. After all, it's easy to see that a stone's defense is far superior to that of scattered sand. Along with the physical changes, the avatar's movements were far quicker and more fluid. Gone were the slow, puppet-like motions it had during past battles with Minato Namikaze and Jiraiya. Now, Shikaku moved like a living, breathing creature. Its limbs were agile, moving with incredible speed whether running, jumping, or throwing powerful punches. Even the swing of its tail was devastating, capable of sweeping away anything in its path, yet still light and graceful. Most importantly, controlling the avatar no longer required excessive effort. It felt as if it had shifted from being a puppet controlled by chakra strings to a machine with its own preset instructions. Though it still lacked its own consciousness, the avatar could now act almost independently in combat, similar to a summoned beast with its own instincts. This was the true essence of the Dragon Vein chakra's power, turning lifeless, inorganic matter into something that could be controlled and imbued with lifelike qualities. The result was an avatar that not only boasted immense defensive strength but also significantly improved offensive capabilities. However, This was far from the limit of what Dragon Vein Chakra could do for Shikaku's offensive power. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Rasa appeared above Shikaku's head. He connected his chakra to the massive creature below, and with both hands forming seals, Shikaku mirrored him, creating seals with its massive claws. Dragon Vein, Great Breakthrough. Or rather, it should have been called Wind Release, Great Breakthrough. Though the hand seals and effects of the two techniques were identical, the results were anything but the same. Due to Shikaku's enormous size and the infusion of Dragon Vein Chakra, the wind it produced was far stronger. What was normally a C-rank jutsu now packed the destructive power of an A-rank technique. The desert was soon engulfed by an overwhelming storm as a colossal sandstorm spiraled through the air, demonstrating the full extent of the attack's power. Despite the immense destructive power, Rasa couldn't help but feel unsatisfied. There were two key reasons for this. First, although he had granted Shikaku's avatar a semblance of vitality through the power of inorganic reincarnation, he still needed to connect his chakra to it in order to control its chakra fluctuations and activate jutsu. This meant the avatar was still heavily reliant on Rasa for its chakra-based abilities. Second, the chakra consumption was far too great. Since the sand that made up Shikaku's avatar was inorganic, it couldn't generate its own chakra. This led to continuous chakra depletion after every jutsu cast, forcing Rasa to constantly replenish it. Despite the fact that the Dragon Vein Chakra granted Rasa 4 powerful abilities, inorganic reincarnation, material transformation, super speed regeneration, and chakra absorption, it didn't directly enhance his physical body in the way that Hashirama's cells had. Rasa's chakra reserves, though formidable, were still limited, and he couldn't endlessly absorb Dragon Vein energy without causing an imbalance within himself. Looking at the situation from this perspective, consuming the chakra fruit, formed from the condensed Dragon Vein Chakra, could have potentially solved the issue. However, Rasa had refrained from doing so. He feared that eating the fruit could accelerate the thawing of the Kama seal inside him. Although Rasa had greatly enhanced his strength through the powers of the Kama seal, he remained wary of the potential danger of being overwhelmed or taken over by it. His caution wasn't unwarranted, as the Kama seal still posed a lingering threat. Moreover, considering his current abilities, Rasa felt confident that his strength was more than enough to handle any challenges in the ninja world at the moment. The Shikaku's avatar was also powerful enough to stall a fully form-tailed beast for some time, meaning there was no immediate need for further risk. It was a bit of a letdown, though. Rasa had hoped that the Dragon Vein Chakra's chakra absorption ability would be the solution to his dilemma. Unfortunately, after experimenting with it, he discovered that while the Dragon Vein Chakra could absorb chakra, it couldn't convert the absorbed chakra into usable power. This setback didn't mean, however, that Rasa had hit a wall in his development of Shikaku's avatar. With a decisive gesture, Rasa clasped his hands together, and the Shikaku's avatar began to shift and change. In the blink of an eye, the massive figure split into 100 smaller versions of Shikaku, each of them resembling the slugs of the Shikatsu forest. Though they were called smaller, each of these new avatars was still the size of a small mountain when compared to a human. Rasa had dubbed this technique Dragon Vein, Shikaku's Avatar Division Technique. The inspiration for this technique came from Sasori of the Red Sands Puppet Master, Red Secret Technique, performance of 100 puppets. Rasa had developed this technique as a response to Sunagakure's lack of military strength. Thanks to the Dragon Vein Chakra's inorganic reincarnation, Rasa, despite not being a skilled puppeteer, could effortlessly control the hundreds of smaller Shikakus created from the original avatar. On top of that, through the Dragon Vein Chakra's material transformation, each of these miniature Shikakus was equipped with weapons. Each puppet held a shield in one hand and a sword in the other. With their immense size, chakra absorption abilities, and resistance to most ninjutsu, they were formidable. These puppets could unleash destructive power comparable to a Chunin's level of combat ability, effectively adding 100 Chunin to Sunagakure's forces. However, despite being the Kazekage and possessing some puppetry knowledge, Rasa wasn't a true master of the craft. Controlling 100 puppets perfectly was already pushing his limits. Had he been able to do so, the power of these puppets would have far surpassed that of mere Chunin. Furthermore, their numbers could easily have exceeded 100. At this point, the development of the Shikaku's avatar technique had nearly reached its peak. The next phase would involve further refining Rasa's own abilities, such as magnet release and sand control jutsu. Meanwhile, in Sunagakure, under the leadership of Pakura and Michikawa, hundreds of Sunagakure ninjas had left the village. They were headed toward the advancing forces of Kumogakure and Iwagakure, making their way across the desert with determination. Perhaps it was due to the success of their previous attack on the Land of Fire, but the people of Sunagakure no longer felt the deep anxiety they once had about the looming war. As time passed, Rasa continued to receive reports from the front lines. The Cloud Forces, who had landed on the coastline of the Land of Ghosts, had pushed through the Land of Marsh and linked up with the IWA ninja forces in the Land of Birds. Together, they formed a formidable army, preparing to invade the Land of Wind. Upon receiving this information, Michikawa and Pakura led the Sunagakure forces to the border to confront the combined Kumo and IWA armies. The entire border of the Land of Wind grew tense, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as if a battle could break out at any moment. Yet, neither side seemed eager to engage in combat, and a strange calm settled over the region. Just as the tension reached its peak, a new and unexpected force emerged on the battlefield. It was known as Akatsuki. Chapter 57, The Akatsuki. Land of Wind, Sunagakure. After receiving the latest intel from the Umbu, Rasa was forced to abandon his jutsu development and return to the Kazekage office from the desert. Akatsuki? Rasa raised an eyebrow, surprised. That's right, Kazekage-sama. Those ninjas go by that name. Baki, too, seemed taken aback, a hint of disbelief crossing his face. By now, it had been 5 days since Pakura and Michikawa had led the Sunagakure forces to the border of the Land of Wind to confront the combined forces of Kumogakure and Iwagakure. Over the course of these days, the two sides had exchanged small skirmishes, but neither seemed eager for a full-on battle. As a result, no major conflict had broken out, yet. However, just last night, both Kumogakure and Iwagakure had ramped up their actions, clearly preparing for a full-scale invasion of the Land of Wind. It seemed that their patience had worn thin after Sunagakure's unwavering stance over the past few days. The purpose of the Kumogakure and Iwagakure forces at the border was clear. By combining their strength, they intended to pressure Sunagakure into softening its position and joining them in an attack on Konoha. But Sunagakure wasn't backing down. You march right up to someone else's doorstep, and this is your way of negotiating? Sunagakure will never be cowed by any village. If you want to meet with our Kazekage, then first pull back your forces. Pakura and Michikawa's response was firm, unwavering, and direct. They weren't just tough with their words, they meant every action they took. Over the past few days, Sunagakure had given a fierce counterattack to any Kumogakure or Iwagakure ninjas who dared cross the Land of Wind's border. This relentless pushback made the enemy forces second-guess their next move. And that was exactly why Kumogakure and Iwagakure had reached a tipping point. They were done waiting. It was time to teach Sunagakure a lesson they wouldn't forget. But just as they were preparing to make their move, a new group of figures appeared on the battlefield. The Akatsuki. And, yeah, I know Akatsuki didn't wear red cloud cloaks during the pre-pain era. Just think of this as an AU. Rasa, still holding the intelligence in his hand, was once again taken aback. He couldn't recall Akatsuki having any involvement during the Third Great Ninja War. Moreover, judging by the intel in his hands, it seemed a significant number of Akatsuki ninjas had appeared on the battlefield, which meant that this version of the Akatsuki hadn't yet transformed into the notorious S-rank rogue organization that would come to define the future. That made sense. After all, Obito Uchiha hadn't yet become Madara Uchiha, and Nagato and Konin hadn't fallen into darkness. The leader of Akatsuki should still be Ahiko, the one who believed in peace. However, this was the real ninja world, and Rasa didn't fully trust all the information he remembered from the story. He decided to clarify. What's the origin of this Akatsuki organization? Baki seemed to have already prepared an answer. Kazekage-sama, the Umbu has some records on Akatsuki. They're a mercenary group that originated in the land of rain, in Amigakure. Their motto is to achieve peace in the ninja world through non-violent means. Baki paused for a moment, then seemed to take a deep breath, as if explaining to a group of children. Peace in the ninja world, truly a noble ideal. Rasa muttered under his breath, intrigued, then gestured for Baki to continue. Well, because they come from a small country, Akatsuki's main goal is to protect Amigakure from the larger nation's wars. They want to shield their people from the conflicts that affect small countries. As a result, they've recruited many ninjas from other small countries, so their numbers are not insignificant. I see. From the intelligence, Rasa learned that Akatsuki's presence on the battlefield between Sunagakure, Kumogakure, and Iwagakure numbered around 500 to 600 ninjas, far from a small force. No wonder Kumogakure, Iwagakure, and even Pakura and Michikawa appeared so on edge. So, what's their goal this time? Are they planning to take advantage of the chaos? No. Baki shook his head, scratching his chin. Akatsuki sent someone to meet with Pakura-sama and Michikawa-sama. Their purpose is clear, they want to stop the war. Their reasoning is that once a war breaks out, small countries will inevitably become battlegrounds for the larger nations. Interesting. Rasa thought for a moment, then asked. Why didn't they show up when Kumogakure and Iwagakure were attacking Konoha? Do they think Sunagakure is weak and easy to intimidate now? Pakura-sama asked them that, but Akatsuki's response was that smaller countries like the Land of Grass, Land of Taki, Land of Frost, and Land of Iron, while small, are strong and have their own ninja villages to protect them. But countries like the Land of Rain, Land of Birds, and Land of Swamps. Baki trailed off, but Rasa understood what he meant. Still, he didn't buy this excuse. What Baki had said wasn't the real reason. The main forces of the ninja world were on the battlefield between Kumogakure, Iwagakure, and Konoha. Akatsuki's forces couldn't pose much of a threat, but this situation was different. Neither Sunagakure, Kumogakure, nor Iwagakure had deployed their main forces. Ignore them. We will continue with our plan as usual. Rasa made his decision without hesitation. He wasn't worried about Akatsuki. If it were just him, he might have been open to engaging with them, but as the leader of a village, he couldn't afford to appear weak. Baki hesitated for a moment before speaking again. The Akatsuki ninjas said that whoever initiates the war will be their enemy. Humph. Rasa shot Baki a cold glance, making him break into a cold sweat. I'm sorry, Kazekage-sama. I will inform Pakura-sama and Michikawa-sama of your decision. Rasa turned his gaze away and replied. Is there anything else? Baki, relieved by the Kazekage's response, answered quickly. It's Michikawa-sama. He believes Kumogakure and Iwagakure's patience has reached its limit. If things continue like this, we might end up fighting. Kazekage-sama, what do you think? Rasa thought for a moment before answering. Tell Michikawa to let the Kumogakure and Iwagakure forces know that if they want to meet with me, they can send the Third Raikage and Third Shinobi. After all, both sides were eventually going to face Konoha in the end, so it was time to discuss terms. Hi! With that, Baki left, and Rasa didn't waste any time. He headed back to the desert to continue refining his technique. Knowing that he would soon face the Third Raikage and Third Shinobi, it was crucial to prepare based on the latest intelligence he had received. Less than a day later, both the Third Raikage and Third Shinobi received news from the front lines. Interesting, is this little brat going to soften up? In Inoki's eyes, Rasa's message seemed like a sign of retreat. With that thought, Inoki wasn't bothered by the prospect of meeting the young Kazekage of Sunagakure. To be honest, Inoki was quite curious about the clever young leader of Sunagakure. As for Akatsuki, the naive fools, Inoki didn't take them seriously at all. The Third Raikage, shared the same opinion. After consulting with each other, the three parties decided that the summit of the Three Shadows would take place 3 days later in the Land of Birds, the site of the current war. Neither Sunagakure, Kumogakure, nor Iwagakure intended to hide this meeting, and soon, news of the summit spread across the ninja world. Chapter 58, Amigakure, Land of Rain. The sky above was an endless expanse of dark clouds, the rain never relenting, and the towering steel and concrete buildings loomed ominously. This was Amigakure, nestled in the heart of the Land of Rain. Once a powerful force in the world of ninjas, Amigakure's reputation was solidified by its role in igniting the Second Shinobi World War. Under the command of Hanzo of the Salamander, who earned the title of demigod, Amigakure stood as a village capable of challenging even the 5 great shinobi countries. But that strength didn't last. A single devastating war drained Amigakure's resources that had been built up over decades, causing the village to slowly sink into decline. As time passed, Hanzo, once the undisputed leader of the village, aged, and his influence over the village waned. The once mighty Amigakure fell into disorder, with no clear direction. It was in this chaos that Akatsuki began to take shape. Amigakure, in its turmoil, became the perfect breeding ground for the organization's rise. Coupled with the instability of the ninja world and Yahiko's personal charisma, Akatsuki quickly expanded. Within just a few years, the group grew into a mercenary force numbering nearly 1,000 ninjas. While most of these ninjas weren't particularly strong, it was important to note that only the 5 great countries, as well as the now-defunct Hidden Rain and Hidden Waterfall villages, could assemble such a large group. Despite Akatsuki's rapid growth, they still had no plans to dethrone Hanzo of the Salamander. He remained a respected figure among them. During the Second Shinobi World War, Hanzo had waged war against both Sunagakure and Konoha, motivated by his desire to protect the smaller countries from the domination of the great powers. Though his efforts ultimately ended in failure, Yahiko saw himself as the successor to Hanzo's ideals. This was the goal that Akatsuki now sought to achieve. Boom! Thunder cracked through the sky, followed by a torrential downpour. In a small cottage near the border of the Land of Rain and the Land of Birds, 5 cloaked figures gathered. Their black cloaks were adorned with the familiar red cloud patterns of Akatsuki. These were the current leaders of the organization. At the forefront stood Yahiko, his orange hair unmistakable even in the dim light of the storm. Beside him was Konan, her blue hair slightly damp from the rain. To their side stood 2 more figures, one a giant of a man with a Buddha-like presence, known as Daibutsu, and the other, a ninja with strange markings on his face, named Kyusuk. Behind them stood a more subdued figure, Nagato, his red hair barely visible beneath his cloak. Though Akatsuki's ranks had swelled to include hundreds of ninjas, only a select few were truly elite, no more than 10 in total. These 5 were the leaders, the strongest among them. They were gathered to discuss the latest intelligence, their faces clouded with frustration and disappointment. The news that the Kazekage of Sunagakure, the Raikage of Kumogakure, and the Otsutsuki of Iwagakure were meeting in the Land of Birds confirmed their fears. The 3 major ninja villages had completely ignored Akatsuki's warnings. Damn it! What do these big countries think of others, invading another nation's land without a second thought? Kyusuk shouted angrily. His fury stemmed from the fact that he hailed from the Land of Birds. During the Second Shinobi World War, Kyusuk became an orphan due to the battlefield and was forced to flee to the Land of Rain, where he became a ninja of Amigakure. This is the arrogance of the great nations. Daibutsu added, his voice tinged with sorrow as he reflected on the sorry state of things. Konan, despite her now stunning beauty, still carried a hint of childhood innocence in her expression. She glanced at Yahiko, who had remained silent throughout, and quietly asked, Yahiko, what should we do now? Her gaze was filled with concern. This mission was one Yahiko had worked tirelessly to convince everyone to support. Yet, many of them had been skeptical, unsure that the larger ninja villages would take a small mercenary group like Akatsuki seriously. And, as it turned out, they were right. Hearing Konan's words, Yahiko turned to her with a soft gaze. Though his heart stirred, he scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. Sorry, I guess I was too naive, huh? Seeing Yahiko still smiling made Conan relax a little. Daibutsu, trying to offer some comfort, spoke up. This isn't your fault, Yahiko. We're just too small. These big villages don't even see us as a threat. His words hung heavy in the air, and the room fell into a quiet, tense silence. After a long pause, Yahiko finally raised his head, his expression serious. I still want to try. The words caught everyone off guard. Try? What do you mean? What are you going to do? Conan asked, her voice filled with worry. Kyusuk, who had secretly developed feelings for Conan, felt a sting of jealousy, but his concern for Yahiko's safety outweighed it. Yahiko's eyes remained steady as he spoke. I plan to meet with the three kage. If possible. Before Yahiko could finish, the others reacted sharply, including Nagato, who was rarely so vocal. What? Are you crazy? No, absolutely not. What if they? Yahiko met their worried gazes with a calm smile before answering. Since Akatsuki was founded 3 years ago, we've been preparing for this moment. Isn't this what we've been waiting for? If this war continues, it will end up just like the last one, dragging the entire ninja world into the chaos. How many more will die? How many more will become orphans like we were when we were young? What would be the point of everything we've worked for? His soft yet resolute words left the room in stunned silence. They wanted to argue, but the words stuck in their throats. But, don't worry. I'm not an idiot. Yahiko added, sensing their hesitation. His smile was reassuring as he continued. I won't just recklessly march in there. And those three kage might not even want to meet with me. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. So, what's your plan? Daibutsu asked, his tone a little less skeptical now. The three kage will be arriving in the land of birds soon, right? I'm going to request to meet with each of them, as the leader of Akatsuki. If they agree to meet me, I'll do my best to convince them. Kyusuk clenched his teeth and muttered. It won't work. Yahiko nodded, his expression resolute. I know. But we won't know unless we try. Otherwise, all of this will have been for nothing. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, the weight of their words sinking in. Outside, the rain continued to pour, the thunder rumbling in the distance. This is the despair of living in the ninja world. Just as the silence seemed unbearable, Nagato, who had been quietly observing, spoke up for the first time. Yahiko, I'll go with you this time. Chapter 59, The Land of Birds. Without the ravages of war, the Land of Birds could have been one of the most stunning countries in the world. The sky would be a brilliant blue, the forests thick and vibrant, and the lakes sparkling like crystal. It would have been a sanctuary for countless species of birds, and that's precisely how the land earned its name. But with the arrival of the ninja forces from the three great nations, the birds fled, and the lush forests were ravaged. The once pristine land now lay smothered in smoke, its beauty overshadowed by the scars of battle. The summit where the three kages were to meet was located in a village near the site of the clash between the three nations' forces. By the time the war had erupted, the villagers had already abandoned their homes, fleeing in fear of the violence. Ninjas from all three villages had taken positions around the village, carefully watching each other, wary of any sudden moves from the other factions. As the closest to the land of birds, Inoki, the third Kazekage, was the first to arrive. Next came Rasa, the Kazekage of the land of wind, who shared a border with the land of birds. Accompanying him were his bodyguards, Baki, the leader of his Umbu, and Yashimaru, his brother-in-law and a medical ninja. Rasa had made these arrangements for his own protection, considering his current strength, the only real threats to him were jinjutsu or poison. The summit was scheduled for the following day, so Rasa, accompanied by his two trusted guards, first met with Pakura and Michikawa. It looks like everyone is in good spirits, Rasa remarked with a grin, observing the relaxed and well-rested Pakura and Michikawa inside the tent of the Sunagakure faction. Pakura rolled her eyes in response, while Michikawa spoke seriously. Just as you expected, Kazekage-sama, Iwagakure and Kumogakure have no intention of attacking us. So, even though we're facing ninjas from two nations, the pressure isn't overwhelming. But Rasa's next question shifted the tone, as it was something that truly concerned him. What about the Jinchuriki from Iwagakure and Kumogakure? How strong are they? Pakura and Michikawa both furrowed their brows at the question. They didn't try to act tough, instead speaking candidly. They're very strong. If it was just the partial-tailed beast transformation, I wouldn't be too worried. But when they go into full-tailed beast form, their power becomes nearly uncontrollable. The best we can do is delay them. Michikawa continued, his voice grave. Facing those chakra beasts, if it weren't for the star-release chakra you gave us, Kazekage-sama, we'd truly be in serious trouble. The tailed beasts are the ultimate weapons, the symbol of a nation's power. Sunagakure also needs its own Jinchuriki. Michikawa's words immediately captured everyone's attention. Sunagakure did indeed have its own Jinchuriki, Bunpuku, the host of Shikaku. However, he was already far too old and unfit for battle. This made Michikawa's words all the more pointed. A new Jinchuriki meant the death of the previous one and the rise of another monster. Baki's eyes shifted toward Rasa, who was likely the only one in the village fully aware of Bunpuku's condition. Rasa understood why Michikawa would be thinking this way. Compared to the limitations of human power, the tailed beasts, born as natural chakra monsters, had the potential to drastically change the outcome of battles. It wasn't surprising that every ninja village coveted them. Selecting a Jinchuriki should not be rushed, choosing the right candidate is no simple task. Rasa remarked with a stern voice. Michikawa nodded in agreement, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. This was indeed the truth. Suppressing the chakra of a tailed beast was no easy feat. It took more than simply picking a random person to host its power. Rasa then shifted the conversation. How's the meeting location? It's a nearby village. We've surveyed it multiple times, and neither Iwagakure nor Kumogakure has interfered with our reconnaissance. It seems relatively safe for now, but we can't afford to let our guard down. Pakura paused, then added. So, does this mean we won't have to fight anymore? Rasa shook his head. The fight must continue. However, whether our enemies will be Iwagakure, Kumogakure, or Sunagakure depends entirely on the outcome of this summit. Pakura and Michikawa exchanged uneasy glances. They certainly didn't want to be caught in a war with either Kumogakure or Iwagakure. The more they fought against ninjas from other villages, the more they could sense the relative weakness of their own forces. Compared to Kumogakure and Iwagakure, which boasted vast amounts of talent and even wielded tailed beasts as weapons, Sunagakure's high-level combat forces were noticeably lacking. Their only advantage came from exploiting Konoha's vulnerabilities. Noticing the concern in their expressions, Rasa reassured them. Don't worry. The fact that the Raikage and Tsuchikage have agreed to attend this summit shows that they share my views. The two nodded in understanding, the weight lifting off their shoulders as their anxiety eased. One couldn't help but admire Rasa. With his calm and steady leadership, they felt more confident even in such turbulent times. From their perspective, if they were in Rasa's position as the Kazekage, would they have been as composed in the face of such chaotic circumstances? The conversation eventually shifted away from the summit, and Pakura spoke with a sly smile. Oh, by the way, there's a letter from that organization called Akatsuki. It's addressed to you, Kazekage-sama. She pulled out a scroll and tossed it to Rasa. Pakura wasn't privy to the contents of the letter, as it was specifically for the Kazekage's eyes only. Still, curiosity naturally gnawed at her. Rasa froze for a moment as he caught the scroll. When he opened it, his expression shifted to one of bemusement. How cute! They are really naive. Rasa muttered under his breath, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But his amusement faded quickly as he made up his mind. If the leader of this Akatsuki organization wants to meet me, I'll give them a chance. Respond to them. If they have the guts, they can come to our Sunagakure camp after the summit tomorrow. He tossed the scroll back to Pakura and the others. After a quick glance, they understood the contents. With a curious look, Pakura asked, "So, what exactly is this Akatsuki organization? When they appeared 3 days ago, I was surprised. But why does their leader seem so childish?" Baki stepped in to explain. He recounted the origins of Akatsuki, sharing that their stated goal was to promote peace within the ninja world, and they intended to do so through non-violent means. At this revelation, both Pakura and Michikawa were momentarily stunned. Such an ideal was rare, almost unheard of, in the ninja world. Intrigued, Rasa leaned forward and asked, "Have any of you met members of Akatsuki? What do you think of their strength?" Michikawa paused for a moment, carefully considering his response. "They're all very young. Their leader is quite powerful, but the others are fairly average. However, the sheer number of their ninjas is impressive. Who would have thought there was such a mercenary organization in the Land of Rain? Given Hanzo's nature, how could he have allowed Akatsuki to exist? I've heard that Hanzo hasn't been seen in public for a long time." Baki added, "I wonder if—" Rasa frowned, shaking his head. Since Yahiko is still alive, Hanzo shouldn't have died. If things were following the original timeline, even my transmigration wouldn't have altered that. Just then, a ninja rushed into the tent. "Kazekage-sama, the Reikage from Kumogakure has arrived." Chapter 60, The Three Kage Talk, Part 1. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light began to filter through the sky, the vast forest remained in peaceful slumber. But deep within the dense woods of the Land of Birds, a large group of ninjas, each wearing their village's headbands, moved swiftly through the trees. Their destination was clear, the village nearby. The village, small but visible in the distance, had already been surrounded by ninjas from Sunagakure, Kumogakure, and Iwagakure. The three groups had formed a tense perimeter, each village keeping a careful watch on the others, their awareness of each other thick with caution. At that moment, three figures emerged from the shadows of the forest in the direction of Kumogakure. Leading the group was none other than the third Reikage of Kumogakure. His muscular chest was bare, his imposing figure exuding a heavy, powerful aura that made the ninjas from the other villages swallow nervously at the sight of him. "Am I really the first to get here? That old fool Inoki and the Fourth Kazekage are so slow," Reikage muttered with a grunt. Flanking him were his bodyguard, Darui, a skilled jonin from Kumogakure, and a young girl with a ponytail, Yujito ni, the two-tails Jinchuriki from Kumogakure. Before anyone could reply, an elderly voice rang out from behind them. "Humph. Old fool! Reikage, you're not exactly a spring chicken yourself." From the sky, three figures descended. The first was the small but dignified Inoki, the third Tsuchikage, wearing his signature Tsuchikage robes. He was accompanied by the Kumogakure Jonin Kurobachi and the elderly Rashi, the four-tails Jinchuriki. The third Reikage didn't even bother to respond to Inoki's words. He simply surveyed the area around him, his gaze sharp. "Now it's just the Fourth Kazekage left?" Ai asked, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. Inoki, with a smirk on his face. "Kids these days really don't know how to show respect to their elders." Just then, a gust of yellow sand burst out from the forest, swirling toward the gathered ninjas. As the sand settled, the last of the three Kages appeared, a tall figure clad in the Kazekage robes, Rasa, the Fourth Kazekage. Behind him stood his trusted companions, Pakura and Michikawa. Rasa surveyed the other Kages and their guards with a sharp, calculating gaze before speaking. "It's only natural that the main act comes last." Rasa grinned as he rubbed his robe. "The main act?" Inoki sneered, his voice laced with mockery as he looked down at the young Kazekage. "Kid, what makes you think you have the right to be the main act here? Do you honestly think you're above me? Deserve?" Rasa's expression remained unchanged, his calm demeanor never faltering as he met Inoki's glare. He then shifted his gaze to the third Reikage. "Let's get this straight. This time, it's your villages that are asking for our help, not the other way around. Are you sure you know what you're saying, brat?" The third Raikage's face twisted with anger, his muscles tensing as if ready to spring into action. The tension in the air thickened immediately, and every ninja present braced themselves, sensing the volatile atmosphere ready to explode at any moment. Yet, Rasa remained unfazed by the Raikage's fury. What, is that not the truth? If it's not, then there's no reason for this Three Kages summit. We can all go back to our villages and forget this ever happened. Ha! The third Raikage's pupils widened in pure anger. His fists clenched so tightly that they seemed ready to shatter with the force of his grip. Darui, standing beside the Raikage, quickly raised a hand to stop his leader, saying, "Raikage-sama, please calm down." Then, turning his stern gaze toward the young Kazekage of Sunagakure, who had provoked the Raikage so quickly, Darui initiated the issue. "Kazekage of Sunagakure, let's not forget that it was you who initiated this summit. If I understand things correctly, our objectives should align, so there's no need for this back and forth, right?" Darui's words drew the attention of the Kages and their bodyguards, and the atmosphere shifted slightly. Rasa, the fourth Kazekage, was momentarily taken aback by Darui's sharp insight. He nodded, acknowledging the point. It seems Sunagakure still has some smart people after all. Inoki snorted, his disdain obvious. "Well, if that's the case, let's not waste any more time." With that, the tension of the initial exchange eased, and the Three Kages summit began in a slightly more relaxed manner. The Kages, along with their respective bodyguards, proceeded to the heart of the village, where the meeting was set to take place. Inside the village stood a traditional Japanese-style temple, its atmosphere somber and formal. Due to the absence of a neutral party and the deep mistrust between the villages, the meeting room was kept deliberately plain. 3 tables were arranged at the center, each symbolizing one of the 3 nations, Sunagakure, Sunagakure, and Iwagakure. Behind the tables, 3 massive statues of Buddhas stood serenely, their peaceful faces now draped with flags displaying the emblems of the respective villages. Creak! The sound of the Kages settling into their seats, with their bodyguards standing at attention behind them, signified that the Three Kages summit had officially begun. Inoki, known for his impatience and perhaps eager to assert his authority, was the first to speak. "Before we begin, I need to clarify something. As the Raikage's bodyguard pointed out earlier, Kazekage of Sunagakure, are you truly aligned with us in purpose? This is a requirement before we can continue our discussions." Rasa, sitting calmly in his seat, feigned confusion. "Aligned in purpose? Tsukikage, what exactly do you mean by aligned in purpose?" The third Raikage, ever direct, wasted no time. "Stop with the nonsense. Kazekage, does Sunagakure intend to join us in attacking Konoha?" The bluntness of the Raikage's question shocked everyone in the room. However, Rasa remained composed, as by now, there was no reason to hide the truth. "To us, the 4 great nations of the ninja world, Konoha." Rasa's voice slowed as he glanced briefly at the third Tsukikage and Raikage before continuing. "Konoha is a formidable enemy. The Senju, Uchiha, Hyuga. If there's a chance to weaken Konoha, I'm sure no nation would turn it down." Rasa's words seemed to alleviate some of the tension in the room. At least now, it was clear that all 3 sides shared a common objective, allowing the talks to move forward. Inoki, never one to beat around the bush, cut to the chase. "If you understand that, Kazekage, then why refuse our proposal to join forces?" Rasa glanced at Inoki before responding, his tone measured. "It's simple. As the leader of my village, I have to carefully consider what joining this war would bring to Sunagakure. While the idea of weakening Konoha is tempting, if it means putting my village's interests at risk, I'll need to think it over more thoroughly." Chapter 61, The Three Kage Talk, Part 2. From the perspective of a village Kage, Rasa's words at this moment were perfectly reasonable. Neither the third Raikage, nor the third Tsukikage, Inoki, could find any fault in Rasa's statement from this angle. "So, fourth Kazekage, what exactly are you getting at with this?" The third Raikage, couldn't hold back and asked impatiently. Rasa, already prepared, replied with a calm demeanor. My position is simple, and I've outlined it clearly in the letters. As long as our village receives the benefits owed to us and support for Sunagakure's involvement in this war, we'll be fully committed to sending our forces into battle. But Inoki immediately shot him down. Don't be ridiculous, Fourth Kazekage. Even Kirigakure, who joined this war as mercenaries, is covering their own military costs. There's no chance we'd pay for your army. Besides, I heard you got a pretty hefty sum during your raid on the Land of Fire over a month ago, right? Rasa's eyes showed a trace of arrogance as he nodded coolly. That's correct. But Sunagakure isn't like Kumogakure or Iwagakure. The harshness of our environment means we're severely lacking in resources. The funds from that raid only helped to slightly ease our financial strain. Pakura, standing behind him, couldn't help but look at him with a strange expression on her face. As I thought, I'm just not cut out to be Kazekage. If it were her, she wouldn't have the nerve to say something like that. Michikawa, however, maintained his calm. The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. By now, both the Kumogakure and Iwagakure representatives could clearly see Rasa's intent. The young Kazekage of Sunagakure had one simple goal: if Sunagakure was to join the assault on Konoha, either Kumogakure or Iwagakure would have to help pay for the military costs. But that was out of the question. Neither Kumogakure nor Iwagakure would ever agree to such terms. Inoki narrowed his eyes and sneered. No. You must be joking, Kazekage. There's no precedent for such a thing in the entire ninja world. Every village's military expenses are precious. We're not going to allocate any of our funds to you. That would make us the laughingstock of the entire world. The third Kazekage, added his own voice to the rejection. I've also heard that the daimyo of the Land of Fire has been pressuring Konoha to invade your Land of Wind. If you let Konoha rebuild, they'll surely come after your nation. Rasa, however, remained as unshaken as ever. That's a problem for Sunagakure to handle. You don't need to worry about it. Seeing Rasa remain so resolute, the third Kazekage's anger boiled over, veins bulging in his forehead. Inoki's frown deepened. At this moment, Darui, standing behind the third Kazekage, stepped forward again. Apologies, Kazekage-sama, but I have something I'd like to say. Seeing Darui, the third Kazekage sighed and allowed him to speak. Internally, he knew he couldn't let the fourth Kazekage toy with him. Oh, Darui, go ahead. Understood. Darui stepped forward, gave a nod, and saluted each of the kage before turning to Rasa and speaking. Kazekage, since you're the one who called for this 3 Kage summit, you must have come prepared. Why not just state your conditions directly? Of course, if they're as outrageous as before, then forget it. Kumogakure's no fool, and we'll just meet you on the battlefield. At these words, everyone's attention shifted to Rasa. Rasa gave a slight smile. It's so easy to talk with smart people. My plan is simple. He looked around at everyone present and slowly began explaining his prearranged strategy. With Sunagakure's current military strength, it's impossible for us to commit to a full-scale assault on Konoha. I'm sure none of you can afford that either. But honestly, this is a golden opportunity to weaken Konoha, and Sunagakure doesn't want to miss it. So, here's my suggestion: let's treat this as a mercenary deal. Mercenaries. Everyone was taken aback. That's right. Your Iwagakure and Kumogakure can issue missions to Sunagakure, anything you want. Whether it's invading the Land of Fire, attacking Konoha, or disrupting their rear lines, we'll take it on. And we won't ask for much, just pay us according to the standard mercenary rates in the ninja world. The third Kazekage and the third Otsutsuki both fell into thought. Since Rasa refused to budge on the matter of a full-scale attack on Konoha, this did indeed seem like a possible alternative. However, convincing Kumogakure and Iwagakure to accept these terms was unlikely. Inoki was the first to voice his thoughts. No. That won't work for us. Mercenaries are too weak. What we need is for Sunagakure to launch a full-scale assault on Konoha. Only that way can we apply enough pressure on them. A full-scale assault? Rasa sneered, his tone slow and deliberate. Don't be ridiculous, Third Kazekage. If the Third Kazekage said that, he'd have the authority to back it up. But you're a Wagakure? So far, all you've done is watch from the sidelines while Kumogakure attacks Konoha. When your village is ready to go all in against Konoha, then you can talk big. You brat! Inoki's face darkened, his expression souring at the insult. His anger spread to his advisor, who visibly fumed as well. The Four-Tails Jinchuriki, Rashi, only furrowed his brows slightly but remained silent. Meanwhile, the three from Kumogakure watched the exchange with amused expressions, taking in the drama. Thankfully, the Third Kazekage knew how to keep his focus. Well then, Kazekage, state your conditions. What exactly can you offer? What can I offer? Feigning deep thought, Rasa responded. So, Kazekage, does this mean you're willing to consider a mercenary arrangement? No. The Third Kazekage shook his head firmly. As Inoki said, mercenaries are useless on the battlefield. Besides, the Mist Ninjas are already causing enough trouble in the Land of Fire. Adding you from Sunagakure wouldn't make much of a difference. Hearing this, Rasa raised an eyebrow. I see. Well then, Kazekage, what exactly do you expect Sunagakure to do? At the very least, you need to tie up some of Konoha's forces. Unlike the calculating Inoki, the Third Kazekage, who was directly engaged in the fight against Konoha, was more focused on ending the war quickly, which made him more aggressive in his negotiations. The Land of Rivers. Rasa's calm response left the Third Kazekage momentarily stunned. Sunagakure can posture as though we're attacking Konoha, but the battlefield will be confined to the Land of Rivers. As a gesture of goodwill, this part will be free of charge. However, if you want us to take further action, that will come at an additional cost. You brat! Are you even a kage? All you talk about is money. Don't you want to avenge your village's Third Kazekage? Inoki's irritated words were met with an even sharper retort from Michikawa. That's our village's concern, Kazekage. You're out of line. Inoki wasn't fazed at all and shot back. Kazekage, it seems you can't even manage your subordinates properly. No manners whatsoever. Rasa, completely unfazed, responded. Well, as I've said, being Kazekage isn't an easy job. Though he said this, there wasn't a hint of annoyance in Rasa's tone. Instead, it carried a slight tone of indulgence, almost as if he were humorously tolerating his subordinates. Pakura couldn't help but crack a peculiar smile at this. Seeing this, Inoki could only grumble in frustration. You little brat. By this point, Rasa's patience had reached its limit. Enough with the nonsense, old man. Just tell me, does Iwagakure agree to my proposal or not? Chapter 62, The Three Kage Talk, Part 2. Rasa wasn't one to wear rose-colored glasses. He had no intention of helping Inoki rediscover some lost sense of self. Seeing the old man's dismissive attitude, Rasa shot back without hesitation. You! Inoki's expression soured immediately, but this time, he didn't go so far as to call Rasa a brat with that same condescending tone. He simply sank back into his seat, looking like he'd lost the desire to voice any more complaints. Fine by me. The Third Kazekage didn't waste any time making his decision. He shifted his attention to the Third Kazekage. Inoki, what about you? Don't forget, we now share a common enemy. Inoki clearly wasn't bothered by the threat itself. However, he was a man who always weighed the benefits carefully. The deal Rasa was proposing wasn't a bad one for Iwagakure, it actually lined up pretty well with their interests. The lingering shadow of Madara Uchiha's past actions on Inoki was far too heavy to ignore, and anything that could weaken, or even bring down, Konoha was a deal too sweet to pass up. As for the mercenaries? Inoki wasn't blind to the situation. He saw it for what it was. If he could solve this problem with money rather than sacrificing the lives of his own ninja, it was a no-brainer. No problem. I agree too. With Inoki's agreement, the meeting wrapped up far more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. Now, The only thing left was to sort out the finer details. But that was no longer their concern. Once the general framework of the cooperation had been established, the specifics were to be handled by their subordinates back home in their villages. As a sign of goodwill, the ninjas from each village began to leave, and the kage returned to their respective camps. With the cooperation in place, the next step was to focus on preparing for an assault on the Land of Fire. Of course, Konoha's spies wouldn't miss this, and the ninja world was already starting to buzz with the news. Meanwhile, in Sunagakure, the ninjas were withdrawing in groups, but Rasa didn't seem in a rush to leave. "Are you really sure you want to meet with the leader of this Akatsuki organization?" In the Sunagakure camp, Michikawa, who had already been preparing to leave, asked with a touch of hesitation. From Michikawa's perspective, it didn't make much sense for Rasa, the Kazekage, to want to meet with the leader of the Akatsuki. To him, it seemed like a small, naive group of kids running some kind of half-baked operation. Since I've already agreed, there's no harm in meeting them." "I see." Since Rasa had already made up his mind, Michikawa figured he wouldn't be able to change his stance. "Then I'll leave with the village's ninjas first." Make sure you're ready. The battle with Konoha is next." Just then, Pakura arrived. Rasa had assumed she was coming to say her goodbyes, just like Michikawa, but to his surprise, she chose to stay. Seeing Rasa's confused look, Pakura rolled her eyes and gave him an explanation, somewhat with rosy cheeks. "Just in case, I'll stay behind to protect you. I don't want you to end up like the third." Her words sounded caring, but Rasa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. What did she mean by like the third? "There's no need. With Baki and Yashimaru around, we won't run into any problems." Pakura shot him a look, clearly not pleased by his dismissal. "No. I'll stay. On one hand, I'm the one handling the communication with the Akatsuki. On the other hand, I'd like to meet this Akatsuki brat myself." At this point, Rasa couldn't exactly refuse. The two of them left the camp together. As Michikawa led the rest of the village's ninjas away, the camp slowly started to lose its structure, growing more disorganized and scattered. Pakura watched the exhausted ninjas depart, and for some reason, a thought crossed her mind. She turned to Rasa with a question. "Do you think there will ever be true peace in the ninja world?" "Peace?" Rasa looked at Pakura in confusion. She wore a melancholy expression, her face marked by a sense of disillusionment. "Why do you ask that?" Pakura's voice softened as she responded. "I don't know why, but it feels like, in my memory, this world has always been at war, or preparing for it." She slipped into a nostalgic tone, as though lost in thought. "When I was born, the first great ninja war had just ended. I was too young to understand war back then, and I thought it was just grown-ups fighting. That was the happiest time of my life, until 13 years ago. I had just graduated as a genin when the second great ninja war broke out. I was 12, and I joined the war as a lowly genin. I still remember my first time killing someone." She closed her eyes, pausing for a moment before reopening them. "That was when I understood what war really meant, death. And from that moment on, in my memory, the battlefield has never stopped. There have always been dead bodies, my teammates, my family, my teachers, all of them died in that war. I thought, once that war ended, maybe the ninja world would find some peace. But just a few years later, another war started." Though Rasa had the original host's memories, as a transmigrator, he couldn't truly empathize with Pakura. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that one day, war would end, but knowing how things played out in the future, Rasa knew that was a lie. Even if the third great ninja war ended, there would be the fourth. And after the battle with Kage Otsutsuki, the Otsutsuki clan would return. War, it seemed, would never truly stop. Pakura must have sensed Rasa's discomfort, because she smiled awkwardly. "Is it really that hard to answer my question?" Rasa paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It is. The existence of ninjas is meant to serve war, and human desires will never stop. As long as there are desires, War will never end. Never end? Pakura's face grew even more somber. Exactly. Rasa gave a slow nod, but then added something to soften the blow. While war may never end, we can try to make peace last longer. But these methods are difficult. Pakura suddenly turned to look at Rasa, intrigued. What methods? Rasa's answer was straightforward. It's simple. Either we find a common enemy to unite all the ninjas against, so war doesn't break out so easily, or we unify all the divided nations for a permanent solution. Pakura's face became serious as the weight of Rasa's words sank in. Both options seemed nearly impossible, finding a common enemy or unifying the entire ninja world? Neither seemed likely. Do you really think it's possible? Who knows? Rasa didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked out toward the horizon. Maybe one day, we'll be the ones to achieve that goal. Pakura was taken aback. Her eyes gleamed as she stared at Rasa, a flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. She opened her mouth, as if to ask something, but for some reason, the words never left her lips. Just then, Rasa turned back, a smile curling on his face as he said, "Well, let's stop daydreaming. Looks like our guest has arrived." Chapter 63, The Akatsuki Trio, Part 1. Outside the Sunagakure camp, Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan, dressed in the Akatsuki's signature black cloaks, arrived at the entrance of the Sunagakure encampment. As they observed the retreating Sunagakure shinobi, they became a bit tensed. So soon? It had only been a day since the Three Kage summit, yet there was already a resolution. In theory, Sunagakure's retreat was a good thing. It meant that the war might not happen. However, the Akatsuki members couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. A summit that ended this swiftly could only mean one thing: a much larger war was imminent. As the trio stood in confusion, a striking figure appeared before them. She was the girl who was often seen beside the Kazekage. "Are you the leaders of the Akatsuki?" Yahiko steadied himself, took a few steps forward, and replied calmly. "Yes. My name is Yahiko, the leader of the Akatsuki. These are my comrades, Konan and Nagato. I am Pakura, a shinobi of Sunagakure. Follow me. Kazekage-sama is expecting you." Under Pakura's guidance and the watchful eyes of the surrounding Sunagakure shinobi, the three slowly entered the camp. Throughout the journey, they remained on high alert, wary of any potential traps. Thankfully, they reached their destination without incident. Yahiko glanced at the cold and expressionless Pakura before mustering the courage to ask, "Is Sunagakure retreating? Has the Three Kage summit already concluded?" Pakura ignored his question, diverting to the main topic. "You can ask the Kazekage when you see him." Soon, the trio arrived at Rasa's tent. The moment they stepped inside, they saw Rasa, clad in a white Kazekage robe, seated behind a desk. For a brief moment, the large tent seemed to fall into complete silence. Rasa hadn't expected the visitors to be Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato. Their boldness was commendable. His first impression of the three was how young they looked. Despite their attempts at maturity, there was still an undeniable trace of youthful inexperience in their expressions, especially Yahiko, whose bright-eyed gaze carried an almost naive foolishness, reminiscent of a certain future Naruto Uzumaki. Konan, on the other hand, was undeniably beautiful. Her striking eyes were particularly captivating, drawing attention effortlessly. As for Nagato, his long red hair concealed his Rinnegan, making it difficult for Rasa to gauge him fully. While Rasa was silently observing them, the trio was also studying the Kazekage. Their first impression? Young. They had known beforehand that the Fourth Kazekage was relatively young, but seeing him in person still caught them off guard. The title of Kage carried an image of an older, seasoned leader, making Rasa's youthful appearance somewhat surprising. Beyond his youth, however, the most distinct impression Rasa gave off was his air of maturity and composure, a true leader's presence. Yahiko, in particular, was visibly envious. In Rasa, he saw the kind of leader he aspired to be: calm, confident, and commanding. Unlike himself, who often felt clueless and lacking in ability. On the other hand, Konan and Nagato were struck by an eerie sensation. It might have been a mere illusion, but they both felt as if this Kazekage already knew who they were. Rasa's gaze lingered on the two of them with an indescribable strangeness. Especially Nagato, he could feel that the moment Rasa's eyes landed on him, they locked onto his own. However, before either of them could dwell on it, Rasa broke the silence in the tent. "How old are you?" The unexpected question made all three of them freeze momentarily, their brows slightly furrowing. Yahiko stepped forward, asking the question back. "Kazekage, do you think we're just kids?" Pakura watched the conversation with interest. She was curious about these young Akatsuki members, but even more curious as to why Rasa, the Kazekage, had agreed to meet them. "Aren't you?" Rasa countered. Yahiko instinctively wanted to refute, but Rasa's next words caught them off guard. "For your age, you've already accomplished quite a lot, like developing your own organization. That's impressive." It was true. Yahiko and Nagato, the oldest among them, were only 15, while Konan was just 14. Compared to them, Rasa was already an adult at 23. The unexpected praise left Yahiko momentarily flustered. After a brief pause, he scratched his head and grinned awkwardly. Thanks, I guess?" Pakura shot Yahiko an odd look. "This guy is really the leader of Akatsuki? Why does he seem like such an idiot?" Even Konan, with her usually composed expression, tugged at Yahiko's sleeve in mild embarrassment. Fortunately, Rasa remained calm and continued. "So, tell me, why do you, as Akatsuki's leader, want to meet me? If it's about peace in the ninja world, then don't bother. It's a waste of time." "Why is it? Why should we not talk about peace?" Yahiko asked, but Rasa just sighed internally. Yahiko, much like Naruto in the future, lacked the steadiness expected of a leader. The moment Rasa dismissed peace, he immediately reacted with frustration. "Do you all really love war that much? Even if you don't care about smaller nations like ours, don't you at least care about your own village? About your own shinobi's lives?" Pakura was slightly surprised by his reaction. She had initially assumed that Akatsuki was just another mercenary group using the illusion of ninja peace to serve their own interests. But now, she found these young idealists intriguing. She was curious to see how Rasa would respond. Rasa's answer was simple. He looked at the impassioned Yahiko and asked in return, "Tell me, kid, what do you think a ninja is?" The sudden question stunned all three of them. Because they had heard it before. Years ago, they had asked Jiraiya-sensei the same thing. But he hadn't given them an answer, he had told them to find it themselves. 4 or 5 years had passed since then, and yet, they still hadn't found their own answer. A heavy silence filled the tent. Yahiko had his own thoughts, but under Rasa's unwavering gaze, he hesitated. His hesitation revealed the weakness in his conviction. "What's wrong, leader of Akatsuki? Do you not have an answer?" Rasa's voice grew colder, his presence pressing down on them. Luckily, Konan stepped forward before Yahiko could falter any further. She met Rasa's gaze and calmly countered. "Then tell us, Kazekage-sama. What is your answer? What is a ninja?" With her words, all eyes shifted to Konan. Rasa looked at her with admiration. Clever girl. Leaning back in his chair, he assumed a relaxed posture and replied. "My answer is simple, a ninja is nothing more than a tool." "A tool?" Not only Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan were stunned, even Pakura was taken aback. They couldn't understand why Rasa would say such a thing. Fortunately, he elaborated. "That's right. Ninjas are nothing more than weapons raised by the daimyo of their respective nations, tools for war. You think it's a shinobi who love war, but that's not true. The ones who truly crave war are the great nations and their leaders. So if you want to convince someone to stop the bloodshed, don't waste your time on us. Therefore, Go and persuade the daimyo instead. Chapter 64, The Akatsuki Trio, Part 2, Let's count all the wars in Naruto. Aside from the Fourth Great Ninja War, the other three Great Ninja Wars, no matter how you look at them, were all wars between the nations that controlled the major ninja villages. On their own, the ninja villages had little reason to fight each other. After all, while the ninja world wasn't vast, it wasn't small either. If it were just the ninja villages, there would be more than enough space for everyone to develop peacefully. Take Konoha and Sunagakure, for example. Both are essentially just large villages, with a population of at most 100,000. The land they occupy is less than 1,000th of their respective nations. If not for the conflicts between the countries backing them, both villages could have stayed in their own territories, minding their own business and developing independently. Given their relatively primitive state of development, there was no real reason for them to engage in large-scale wars. The only tangible benefit war brought to ninja villages was military funding from the daimyo. As for the spoils of war, land, population, resources, those primarily benefited the countries, not the villages themselves. Rasa's words cast an eerie silence over the entire tent. Yahiko, despite his somewhat naive idealism, wasn't stupid. Having grown up in the war-torn land of rain, he had matured early due to hardship. With just a little guidance from Rasa, he quickly grasped the deeper implications. Pakura also fell into deep thought. To be honest, as a high-ranking member of Sunagakure, she wasn't oblivious to these things. However, as a shinobi, her ingrained mindset made it difficult to see beyond the perspective of a ninja. Like Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan, she had always viewed herself as a key player in the war. She lifted her head slightly, her sharp eyes meeting Rasa's, and a strange emotion stirred within her. Truthfully, as representatives of different factions, Pakura and Rasa had rarely interacted outside of official settings. For the longest time, they had opposed each other as rivals, but she had never truly understood what kind of person Rasa was. This was part of why she had always resented his rise to the position of Kazekage. But now that Rasa was truly leading the village, whether she liked it or not, they had been forced into closer contact. And the more she got to know him, the more she realized Rasa was nothing like the arrogant, insufferable man she had once thought him to be. Now, he exuded a different aura, one of charisma, maturity, wisdom, generosity, and an unshakable sense of security. Even if she didn't want to admit it, she had to. When it came to being Kazekage, she couldn't do a better job than Rasa. That realization made her even more curious. Then why are the daimyo so eager to wage war? It was Pakura who raised the question. Yahiko and his friends, still lost in thought, raised their heads in surprise. They glanced at Pakura, then turned to Rasa, waiting for his answer. Rasa's response was as straightforward as ever. Simple. Because this ninja world was born into an unequal distribution of resources. Everyone once again looked confused. The land distribution in this world is inherently imbalanced. Take the 5 great nations, for example. The most fertile land on the entire continent belongs to the land of fire. With vast, arable fields, it can sustain a large population, which is why it is so wealthy. But what about the other 4 nations? After pausing for a moment, Rasa continued. Over 80% of the land of wind is desert. Most of the land of earth is barren rock and mountains where nothing grows. The land of lightning is dominated by steep, treacherous peaks. And the land of water is scattered across countless small islands. With such poor natural resources, the other 4 nations have only one way to secure what they need, by taking it from others. And the fertile lands of the land of fire have always been an irresistible target. Rasa's words were like a thunderclap, shaking the 4 people before him. They began to realize this was truly an unsolvable deadlock. So, even if you try to convince the daimyo, it won't change anything. Because the real cause of war in this world isn't the people, it's the twisted distribution of land and resources. This isn't something that Akatsuki, or even a single ninja village, can decide. Even if a savior were to bring temporary peace, after their death, the ninja world would inevitably fall back into war over resources. Having said this, Rasa had nothing more to add. But the four before him, Pakura, Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan, were all lost in thought. For the first time, they could see it, no matter how much time passed, no matter how many years went by, the ninja world would remain trapped in endless chaos and war. Yahiko wanted to argue, but he knew Rasa was right. That bleak future crushed his dreams once again. He clenched his fists tightly and asked, "Is there really no hope at all?" Rasa smiled and shook his head. "No, there is still hope. Either find an enemy so great that all ninja must unite against it, making war between nations less appealing, or unite all the fragmented countries into one, solving the issue once and for all." Pakura had already heard this answer from Rasa before, so she wasn't too shocked. But Yahiko and his friends were stunned, staring at Rasa as they struggled to process his words. After a long silence, Yahiko let out a deep breath. Then, with a bright smile, he said, "That's a headache to think about, but still, thank you, Kazekage-sama. I can tell, you're different from everyone else I've met. Not only were you willing to see us, but you also took the time to explain all of this." At that moment, Rasa couldn't help but see traces of Naruto in Yahiko. A strange thought crossed his mind. Could it be? Is Yahiko, like Naruto, also a reincarnation of Ashura? That foolish optimism, it was just too similar. Come to think of it, the timeline matched. Yahiko was born after Hashirama Senju's death, which would make him the reincarnation of the previous Ashura. And Yahiko died during the Third Great Ninja War, right before Naruto was born. And then there is Jiraiya's child of prophecy belief. Nagato, as a member of the Uzumaki clan, seemed like the obvious candidate for the prophecy. But he lacked that unique, almost naive charisma that Hashirama, Yahiko, and Naruto all shared. And maybe, that quality was more important than raw power. Was it just a coincidence? Rasa didn't know. But for some reason, a bold idea formed in his mind. "You don't need to thank me. I only agreed to meet you because I never imagined that such fools could actually exist in this ninja world." Yeah. Being called fools, none of the three looked offended. Rather, they were a little embarrassed. Yahiko even scratched his head and laughed, as if Rasa had just complimented them. And then, Rasa said something that shocked everyone. "But now? I have a different idea. Would you like to join Sunagakure?" Chapter 65, Ambush. Rasa's idea had come to him suddenly, but it was indeed a highly risky move. However, let's think about it. Not just because of Madara Uchiha, even the hidden Black Zetsu would surely take notice of his actions. But the risks are manageable. First, with the help of the Kama Seal, Rasa was confident that his power would rapidly grow to the point where he could compete in the ninja world's highest circles. Second, his knowledge of the future events allowed him to prepare multiple countermeasures for the dangers ahead. If the risks could be controlled, then the potential gains were enormous. Not only would Sunagakure's strength increase dramatically, but the entire Naruto storyline would be pushed in a completely different direction. If Rasa could protect Nagato's Rinnegan, or take it a step further and destroy Madara's eyes entirely, then Madara's revival plan would fall apart. Without his eyes, Madara wouldn't be able to execute the infinite Tsukuyomi plan, meaning Kage Otsutsuki would never be resurrected, and the ninja world could enjoy a period of peace. As for the future threat of the Otsutsuki clan, Rasa wasn't worried. By the time they would arrive, he and Sunagakure would have grown even stronger. Without Madara causing chaos, many of the tragedies in the ninja world would have been avoided. Heck, even the Fourth Great Ninja War might never happen. This meant that the world's overall strength would be preserved, making it far better prepared to face the Otsutsuki threat. While the Otsutsuki clan was indeed powerful, they were far from invincible. From what Rasa knew, Kage, despite being labeled as the disgrace of the Otsutsuki clan, was actually stronger than any of the Otsutsuki introduced later in Boruto. After all, it took a fully powered Naruto and Sasuke working together just to seal her away. They couldn't even kill her. Meanwhile, even the most hyped-up Otsutsuki, like Ishiki, ultimately ended up as little more than a sacrificial pawn for a new Jinchuriki. Oh, and there was also something about an Otsutsuki god? Rasa wasn't too familiar with Boruto's storyline, so he didn't know much about this so-called deity. But he was aware of the Shinjutsu techniques. Now that was a terrifying ability. However, Rasa himself was also a Kama user. He still didn't know where his Kama mark had come from, but it gave him confidence that he could handle whatever crises lay ahead. Especially those godlike Shinjutsu techniques. Maybe, one day, he, too, could master the power of the gods. Land of Birds. After sending off the Akatsuki trio, there was no longer any reason for Rasa and Pakura to stay. Accompanied by Baki and Yashimaru, they began their journey back to Sunagakure. Deep within the forests of the Land of Birds, their figures swiftly moved towards the Land of Wind. Although Rasa had the ability to fly using his sand, there was no way the leader would act as a chauffeur for his subordinates. So, the four of them traveled the old-fashioned way, running like ordinary ninja. As high-ranking members of the village, Rasa and Pakura naturally walked at the front, with Baki and Yashimaru flanking behind on either side, staying vigilant of their surroundings. Are you serious? In the forest, the scenery rushed past them quickly. Pakura's voice sounded in Rasa's ear. What are you talking about? I mean, do you really want to invite this Akatsuki group into our village? Rasa didn't answer immediately, instead asking a question in return. What do you think of these three Akatsuki kids? Pakura thought for a moment before answering. The one called Yahiko looks a bit foolish, but he's quite likable. The girl named Konan is beautiful and intelligent. As for the one called Nagato, I didn't really pay attention to him since he didn't seem to speak a single word the entire time. Rasa nodded. These three might be young, but considering they've already managed to form an organization called Akatsuki and gathered so many people, they must have significant potential. Pakura nodded in understanding. I see. So, you have a soft spot for talented individuals? Maybe. You should be able to tell by now that there are very few ninja in our village who can stand on their own. Besides you and Michikawa, there's hardly anyone I can rely on. Elder Chiyo and Elder Ebizo are both too old, and I'd rather not have them spend their final years on the battlefield if I can avoid it. Pakura was a bit surprised by Rasa's gentle tone. She hadn't expected him to show such tenderness. I heard you're planning to have Karura help out too. Yeah. It'd be a waste for Karura's talents to be confined to just being a housewife. However, as her husband, I can't let her get involved in dangerous missions, so I'll keep her in the village for now. This made Pakura's eyes brighten. Even Yashimaru, behind them, couldn't help but smile gently. So, are you not planning on having children with Karura? Pakura's sudden question caught Rasa off guard, and he turned his head to look at her. He saw Pakura's delicate face, calm but with a hint of unease. Rasa's mood lightened before he chuckled. Of course we are. We've been working on it recently. Pakura's face turned slightly red, but Rasa continued. What about you? Children are the future of the village, and as an elite ninja of the village, you can't fall behind. Pakura, who usually had an ice-cold expression, showed a rare moment of embarrassment before rolling her eyes at Rasa. Just worry about your own business. With that, she leaped away, intending to speed up and put some distance between herself and Rasa. But just then, Rasa suddenly stretched out his hand and blocked her path. Watch out! What? Pakura didn't have time to react. Rasa swept his hand, and countless grains of yellow sand shot up from the ground, forming a circular sand wall that completely surrounded them. In that instant, a barrage of kunai rained down on them from the forest. Whoosh! The entire sand wall was immediately covered in a layer of kunai, like a bed of needles. Pakura's face turned pale. The ambush had come too suddenly, she had been completely unprepared. If Rasa hadn't intervened, she likely would have been pierced through by the kunai. Baki and Yashimaru, also startled, quickly moved to Rasa's and Pakura's sides, forming a defensive perimeter. Luckily, Once the ambush proved ineffective against Rasa's defense, the forest around them fell eerily silent. But in that moment, looking at the dark forest surrounding them, Pakura, Baki, and Yashimaru all wore grim expressions. The disappearance of the Third Kazekage was still fresh in their minds, and although none of them were professional sensory ninja, as high-ranking jonin, they all had a certain degree of sensory awareness. However, despite their vigilance, they couldn't sense anything in the forest. Chapter 66, The Aburi Clan. Pakura, who had almost been ambushed and killed, was now filled with rage. Although she was a ninja and understood that life and death were common occurrences, dying in such an inexplicable way would be far too frustrating, especially in front of Rasa. "Who is it?" Pakura glared angrily into the surrounding forest, but there was no response. The forest was eerily silent, as if no life existed within it. Rasa also observed his surroundings. Just moments ago, he had sensed a strange energy. This energy was not chakra but was similar to the natural energy found in the dragon vein. That was why he had been able to detect the trap in advance. However, now, he could no longer sense the presence of an enemy. So, he immediately issued the orders. "Baki! Force these insects out." "Got it!" With Rasa's command, the furious Baki immediately formed hand seals. Wind release, great breakthrough. A powerful gust of wind surged from Baki's mouth, blowing toward the forest where the kunai had come from. The immense wind force knocked down a large section of trees. As Baki used his wind release, Rasa once again sensed that familiar presence. At the same time, Pakura and Yashimaru also saw it. Countless figures seemingly appeared out of nowhere in the forest. They did not look like professional ninjas. Their clothing was simple and tattered, and they each held a kunai. By rough estimate, there were around 40 to 50 of them. Among the four-man squad, only Rasa, due to his advanced perception, had witnessed how these individuals had materialized. "What is this?" They saw countless wisps of purple smoke gather among the branches of the forest, taking the shape of human figures before solidifying into flesh and blood bodies. Rasa was certain this was neither Jinjutsu nor a transformation jutsu. These were real bodies, formed from condensed smoke. He also detected no chakra fluctuations, only the same kind of natural energy as the dragon vein. Interesting. At that moment, Rasa was truly intrigued. This scene reminded him of the elemental transformation he had seen in the anime One Piece. Just then, seeing the ambushers forced out, Baki seemed to recall something and spoke up. "Kazekage-sama, if I'm not mistaken, these should be ninjas from the Aburi clan." Baki's words caught everyone's attention. With an annoyed expression, Pakura raised a question. "The Aburi clan? What is that?" Baki coldly eyed the ninjas before explaining. The Aburi clan is a group of ninjas residing within the Land of Fire. They do not belong to Sunagakure but are instead wandering shinobi. The Aburi clan possesses a unique ability called the Smoke Transformation Jutsu, which allows them to turn their bodies into smoke, enabling silent assassinations. Even sensory-type ninjas have difficulty detecting them. "I see." Pakura finally understood why she had nearly been ambushed. Hearing this, Rasa was curious about this kind of clan. Is this technique similar to the hydrification technique of the Kirigakure Hozuki clan? Yes, Kazekage-sama. However, there is a difference. The hydrification technique of the Hozuki clan is a secret technique that requires training to master. The Aburi clan, on the other hand, is different. Their smoke transformation jutsu is an ability they are born with. Because of this, they cannot control it as skillfully as the Hozuki clan controls their water transformation. This lack of control has led to a high mortality rate among the Aburi clan's members. Aside from that, Baki glared viciously at the Aburi clan ninjas in the distance before continuing. The smoke transformation jutsu, like the hydrification technique, has a major weakness, and that is, when in their smoke form, the Aburi clan is extremely vulnerable to wind release techniques. As Baki finished speaking, the expressions of the Aburi clan ninjas grew even darker. Seeing this, Rasa immediately understood. It seemed that the Aburi clan's ability was somewhat similar to Yugo's, which made it even more intriguing. Taking a few steps forward, he asked coldly, "Did Konoha send you to assassinate me?" Upon hearing the mention of Konoha, everyone's expressions changed. The Aburi clan ninjas looked utterly stunned. Upon seeing their reaction, Rasa was certain. At this point, the only village that had the strength and reason to orchestrate his assassination was Konoha. He had just secured an alliance with Kumogakure and Iwagakure, and he had no significant dealings with Kirigakure. The only village that still held a grudge against him was Konoha. It looks like I am right after all. Hearing this, the Aburi clan ninjas became even more flustered before one of them roared, "Kill them!" In an instant, all the Aburi clan ninjas transformed into humanoid purple smoke and surged toward Rasa's team. Baki and Yashimaru were about to act, but Rasa stopped them. "I'll handle this." If these had been ordinary ninjas, Rasa wouldn't have bothered making a move himself. However, this smoke transformation jutsu intrigued him. Seeing Rasa's confidence, Baki and Yashimaru nodded and stepped back. Rasa formed a single-hand seal. Magnet release, sand tendrils. Fine yellow sand began to spread through the air, condensing into multiple tendrils that lashed out, binding the closest Aburi ninjas. Whoosh! However, the captured Aburi ninjas instantly turned into smoke, slipping free from the sand's grasp. It was clear they feared wind release, so they immediately reformed into their smoke-like human forms, preparing to turn solid once again. How intriguing! With a sudden movement, Rasa disappeared from his spot. When he reappeared, he was in midair, his right hand reaching out. Boom! One of the Aburi ninjas in his smoke form was suddenly grabbed by the throat. How is this possible? The surrounding Aburi ninjas were dumbfounded. Their smoke transformation jutsu was supposed to make them immune to physical attacks. And yet, their horror had only just begun. In midair, a purple chakra flared around Rasa's right hand. The smoke-formed Aburi ninja let out a blood-curdling scream before vanishing completely, seemingly consumed by the purple energy. This scene shocked not only the Aburi clan but also Pakura and the others. They had never known their Kazekage possessed such an ability. However, Rasa didn't bother explaining. As he absorbed the Aburi ninja through the Kama seal, he immediately felt a slight change in his body. However, it wasn't enough. The amount of chakra absorbed still wasn't sufficient to cause a complete transformation. His cold gaze swept over the remaining Aburi ninjas, not as if he was looking at living people, but as if he was staring at mere food. Since that was the case. 5 Seal Barrier. A massive barrier enveloped all the Aburi clan ninjas. Realizing Rasa's intent, their expressions turned to sheer terror, as if they were staring at a demon. Why? This was nothing like what they had planned. Chapter 67, Sunagakure vs. Sunagakure. Somewhere in the land of birds. Deep within a dense forest, a group of shinobi clad in Konoha ANBU uniforms lay hidden, as if waiting for something. However, an hour had passed, and their expected target had yet to appear. 3 figures slowly emerged from the shadows of the trees. Orochimaru, it seems your plan has failed. Draped in a black cloak that concealed his entire form, Orochimaru remained unfazed by the failure, and then spoke in a calm, indifferent tone. Isn't that only natural, Danzo-sama? After all, we're dealing with the Kazekage. If he didn't have at least this level of caution, that would be the truly strange part. Ha! It's just a shame we wasted those test subjects. Half of Danzo's face remained hidden, his expression dark and unreadable. If we don't find out from this Kazekage who leaked root secrets, neither you nor I will be able to sleep soundly, Orochimaru. However, Orochimaru seemed completely unconcerned. Just then, a root shinobi appeared before Danzo and reported. Danzo-sama, the battle ahead has already ended. What's the situation? Forgive me. We couldn't get too close, so we don't know the exact details. But the Kazekage has already left. We investigated the scene afterward, and it seems all the Aburi clan ninjas are dead. Danzo furrowed his brows slightly, while Orochimaru's face showed a trace of amusement. Interesting. The smoke transformation jutsu of the Aburi clan is an exceptional escape technique, yet not a single one managed to flee. This fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure is quite fascinating. The Root Ninja continued reporting. Orochimaru-sama, we observed that the Kazekage appeared to have used a barrier jutsu to trap all of the Aburi ninjas. A barrier, huh? Orochimaru seemed deep in thought. Danzo, however, showed no interest and simply ordered. Forget it. Since the mission has failed, we're withdrawing. I have more important matters to handle back at the village. One by one, the Root Shinobi began to retreat. With no other choice, Orochimaru followed suit. However, just as he was about to leave, something caught his attention. He looked up toward the sky. High above, a giant floating eyeball was watching them. How interesting. Orochimaru said nothing more, merely flashing a cryptic smile as he followed Danzo away. The Eye of Sand. One of many sand manipulation techniques developed by the second Kazekage. It was essentially a variation of the transformation jutsu. By condensing sand into the shape of an eyeball and linking its vision with the user's own, this technique allowed for long-distance reconnaissance. With the ability to adjust the eye's size, the Eye of Sand could observe movements up to 10 kilometers away. Unfortunately, it lacked X-ray vision, meaning it could only detect large, visible movements and provide a general outline of what was happening. Still, it was more than enough. Ha! It is those two again. Seriously, what the hell? Is this level of intelligence of the leader of Root? Even though the vision was slightly blurry, the distinctive attire of Danzo and Orochimaru made them instantly recognizable. There was no need for a clearer look. Seeing the reaction, Pakura asked, "Are they from Konoha?" "Yes." Danzo of Root and Orochimaru of Konoha. Hearing the names Danzo and Orochimaru, the three shinobi present were all visibly shaken. Danzo was the one Rasa had identified as the mastermind behind the assassination of the third Kazekage, and Orochimaru was one of the legendary Sannin. What do we do now? Pakura gritted her teeth as she spoke. Konoha had dared to assassinate their Kazekage. This was a blatant provocation against Sunagakure. Rasa was naturally furious, tempted to march straight over and take their heads, but he restrained himself. Rushing in when we know it's a trap would be foolish. However, I will not let this slide. I was just looking for an excuse to declare war on Konoha, and now they've delivered one right to my doorstep. With that, he turned to Baki, issuing an order. Baki, in my name, use this assassination attempt to formally declare war on Konoha on behalf of Sunagakure. Inform every shinobi in the village, this time, it won't be like last time. We will make Konoha pay in blood. Hi! Kazekage-sama. The news that Konoha's elder Danzo and Orochimaru had failed in their assassination attempt on the fourth Kazekage spread rapidly throughout the shinobi world. Sunagakure used this as justification to formally declare war against Konoha. Upon confirming the news, both Third Raikage, Kumogakure, and Third Tsuchikage, Iwagakure, were ecstatic. They had initially been worried that Sunagakure might hold back in the upcoming war against Konoha. But now, those concerns vanished completely. Assassinating a kage was an act of war in any shinobi nation. It was the greatest diplomatic offense imaginable. Sunagakure's response was far from passive. Immediately after the formal declaration, their advance forces began mobilizing swiftly, crossing the land of rivers and heading straight for the land of fire's borders. And unlike their previous raids, this time Sunagakure was dead serious. Because behind the advanced troops, a massive logistics force was following, transporting supplies out of Sunagakure. This meant Sunagakure wasn't just planning a skirmish or a quick raid, they were prepared for a full-scale, prolonged war against Konoha. The main army's deployment now depended on the finalization of the three-nation alliance between Kumogakure, Iwagakure, and Sunagakure. Both Kumogakure and Iwagakure understood Sunagakure's plan. Eager to seize this golden opportunity to cripple Konoha, they rushed to finalize the three-way alliance as quickly as possible. Konoha, Land of Fire. The moment Konoha received the formal declaration of war from Sunagakure, tension spread through the village like wildfire. Danzo's actions had been completely unauthorized, but at this point, there was no way to pin the blame solely on him. For one, Konoha needed internal unity now more than ever. And secondly, Sunagakure joining the war was inevitable, regardless of Danzo's actions. Besides, Danzo had his own justification. His attempt to assassinate the Fourth Kazekage had been to protect Konoha. If he had succeeded, Sunagakure would have descended into chaos, preventing them from participating in the war at all. But now, that was no longer relevant. Sunagakure was fully committed to war, and both Kumogakure and Iwagakure were mobilizing their forces at the borders, preparing for an all-out confrontation. Seeing this, Danzo finally seized the opportunity to push his real agenda. It's time for the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki to enter the battlefield. With the power of the Nine-Tails, we can turn the tide of war in Konoha's favor. Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, and future Fourth Hokage strongly opposed the idea. However, given the dire situation, many began to see the Nine-Tails' involvement as Konoha's best chance for survival. As the Konoha leadership clashed in heated debate, Rasa had already returned to Sunagakure, where he was greeted with an unbelievable report. Something had happened to the god tree he had planted. Chapter 68, Changes in the God Tree. Above the Demon Desert, near the borders of Sunagakure. Rasa had barely stepped foot back into the village before he was off again, racing into the vast desert at full speed. The reason? Bunpuku had summoned him with great urgency. And the cause of this summons? Something extraordinary had occurred to the god tree he had planted. It had only been half a month since Rasa had sown the dragon vein chakra fruit into the desert sands, yet its astonishing vitality had already begun to manifest. By tapping into the hidden underground rivers coursing beneath the dunes, the chakra-infused tree had woven a network of verdant lifelines across the barren expanse. From above, the sight was breathtaking. Vivid green tendrils snaked across the golden sands, resembling the tributaries of a vast river, bringing forth life where once there had only been desolation. Upon closer inspection, Rasa noticed that these veins of life were not composed of the usual hardy desert flora. Astonishingly, plants from other regions had also begun to take root. The reason was clear: Sunagakure's subterranean waterways originated from neighboring lands such as the Land of Birds, the Land of Rivers, and the perpetually rain-drenched Land of Rain. As these hidden streams meandered beneath the Land of Wind, they carried with them seeds from distant territories. When exposed to the immense life force of the dragon vein, these seeds germinated and flourished at an unnatural rate. This phenomenon was a miraculous blessing for Sunagakure and aligned perfectly with Rasa's grand vision. At this rate, in just 10 years, the dragon vein's influence could reshape the desert into a lush, habitable paradise. But if its chakra could alter the land so dramatically, what effect might it have on the human body? Could exposure to the dragon vein's power fortify Sunagakure's shinobi, enhancing their strength beyond natural limits? With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Rasa pressed forward until he reached the edge of the flourishing greenery. And what he saw left him utterly speechless. Rasa had been meticulously monitoring the god tree's growth from the moment he planted it. Even amid his burdensome village duties, he made a point to visit daily, eager to observe its progress. 3 days ago, this area had been little more than a modest desert oasis, dotted with sparse shrubs and dry grasses. But now, a dense, thriving forest, comparable to the fertile woodlands of the Land of Fire, had sprung forth, seemingly overnight. Though not expansive, roughly the size of a football field, its very presence in the unforgiving desert was beyond comprehension. Could this be the transformation Bunpuku spoke of? Descending on a floating wave of shimmering golden sand, Rasa touched down in the heart of the forest. At the center, encircled by 4 towering statues that anchored the dragon vein's seal, stood an awe-inspiring sight: the god tree itself, its emerald canopy reaching skyward. Nestled at the base of the seal was a modest stone hut, the dwelling of Bunpuku, who had dedicated his life to safeguarding this sacred place. As soon as Rasa's feet touched the ground, his gaze swept across the landscape in quiet astonishment. The scene before him was both familiar and alien, an eerie blend of the known and the impossible. Bunpuku, having sensed his arrival, had already emerged from his stone dwelling to welcome him. Rasa turned toward the elderly man and asked curiously, "Is this the surprise you spoke of, Bunpuku-sama?" Now an elder of the village, Rasa's manner of address toward Bunpuku had changed. It was clear that in recent times, Bunpuku's health had improved significantly. Gone was the frail, deathly look he had when they first met. Now, he seemed full of life and energy. His eyes gleamed with newfound vitality, his stance no longer weighed down by exhaustion. At Rasa's question, Bunpuku pressed his palms together in a solemn gesture, awe flickering across his aged features. "Yes, Kazekage-sama, but this is only one of the surprises." Rasa arched a brow. "One of the surprises?" "That's right, Kazekage-sama. Please, take a closer look at this god tree. Do you notice anything unusual?" Narrowing his eyes, Rasa studied the tree intently. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, aside from its increased size. It had certainly grown larger, its thickened trunk and flourishing branches a testament to its continued expansion. But then, his pupils constricted. His breath hitched. A jolt of disbelief surged through him. Because nestled among the tree's lush, verdant canopy, a fruit had appeared. A spiraled fruit. Rasa stood motionless, his mind grappling with the sheer impossibility of what he was witnessing. Had he not trained himself to maintain a Kazekage's unwavering composure, he might have blurted out something wholly undignified. Because this fruit, this shape, was unmistakable. It looked exactly like a devil fruit from One Piece. Did I transmigrate into the wrong anime? His thoughts spiraled wildly. Is this even Naruto anymore, or have I somehow ended up in the world of One Piece? He turned sharply to Bunpuku, his confusion slipping into his voice. "What the hell is going on, Bunpuku-sama?" Bunpuku pressed his palms together once more, his expression mirroring Rasa's bewilderment. "Kazekage-sama, I do not know. If not for Shikaku's warning, I might never have noticed this fruit." "Shikaku warned you?" "Yes. As a being that has dwelled in the desert for centuries, Shikaku possesses an acute awareness of any disturbances in its surroundings. 3 nights ago, the very night you left the village, I was resting in my hut when his voice echoed in my mind." Bunpuku paused, as if weighing his next words. "He told me something had changed outside. And when I stepped out, I saw this fruit." Rasa's brows knitted together as he sank into deep contemplation. "Did Shikaku say anything else?" Bunpuku gave a slow nod. "Yes. Shikaku said that this god tree you planted is radiating an extremely peculiar chakra, and that this chakra is actively nourishing the land." "Nourishing the land?" Rasa was stunned. His mind flooded with countless thoughts. This wasn't supposed to happen. Rasa's original goal had been simple: harness the natural energy of the dragon vein to alter the harsh desert environment, transforming it into something more hospitable. But ever since the chakra fruit had metamorphosed into a towering tree, an unshakable fear had taken root in his heart. And that fear was this. What if this tree was not a mere anomaly, but an Otsutsuki god tree? Because the true purpose of an Otsutsuki god tree was never to restore life. It was to consume it. Each of these trees was nothing more than a tool, a monstrous siphon designed to extract the very life force of a planet. Its end goal? The birth of a ten-tailed beast. A harbinger of devastation. Rasa's gaze drifted downward, settling on his right palm. There, etched into his flesh, was the unmistakable black spiral, the mark of the Kama seal. A chilling thought slithered into his mind, sharp as a kunai's edge. Is this the true purpose of my Kama seal? Did the Otsutsuki intend for me to nurture a new ten-tails? Rasa might have been a transmigrator, but against the Otsutsuki clan, he was still just a native of this world. A mortal. And he had no intention of letting this planet become mere fuel for their endless cycle of evolution. Yet now, Shikaku had told him something unthinkable. This god tree wasn't absorbing chakra. It was giving it back to the land. How is that possible? Is it because I deliberately sealed its roots inside the black tea kettle? Or, am I just overthinking everything? As his thoughts twisted and tangled, trying to make sense of the impossible, a sound suddenly echoed through his mind. A voice. Deep. Husky. Feminine. A whisper, strange and rhythmic, coiling around his senses like an unseen force. Chakra. Chakra. Chapter 69, Consciousness. Who? Rasa was instantly on alert, his sharp gaze sweeping the surroundings. His abrupt reaction startled Bunpuku, who stood nearby. Kazekage-sama, what's wrong? Did something happen? Rasa didn't hesitate and immediately turned to Bunpuku. Did you hear anything just now? Bunpuku looked at him in confusion before shaking his head. No, Kazekage-sama. I didn't hear anything. A flicker of realization crossed Rasa's eyes. Slowly, his gaze shifted toward the towering god tree before him. A trace of shock surfaced in his expression, yet he still sought confirmation. What about Shikaku? Bunpuku was momentarily taken aback but quickly narrowed his eyes, focusing inward as he communicated with the One-Tail. Moments later, he opened his eyes and shook his head, his expression grave. Shikaku didn't hear anything either, Kazekage-sama. I see. Rasa's eyes darkened slightly as he locked onto the god tree once more. The answer was now evident. The voice he had just heard, there was no mistake. It had come from this very tree. In other words, the god tree had developed consciousness. And more than that, it was asking him for chakra? Rasa felt a wave of tension surge through him. This was yet another indication that the god tree might be deeply connected to the legendary Ten Tails of the Otsutsuki clan. But what unsettled him even more was the nature of the voice he had heard. It had been a woman's voice. Could it be Kage Otsutsuki? If that was the case, then did it mean the Kama seal on his right hand originated from Kage herself? Would he eventually transform into a woman, just like how Madara Uchiha had been influenced by the god tree? I mean, he had no idea what it felt like to have a puss. Absolutely not. Rasa forcibly cut off his own ridiculous train of thought. He exhaled slowly, his mind quickly regaining focus. The sudden change in the god tree had caught him off guard, but at the same time, he realized something important. This wasn't just an anomaly. This was an opportunity. Not only could he confirm whether this god tree was truly the Ten Tails, but he could also investigate the connection between his Kama seal and Kage Otsutsuki. A gamble, yes, but one worth taking. Even if this really was Kage Otsutsuki, what of it? At this point in time, her true form was still sealed on the moon. There was no way she could revive on her own. If anything, she would have to rely on him. With that thought, Rasa quickly made up his mind. Bunpuku-sama. Bunpuku straightened slightly, ears perking up at the Kazekage's call. I'm going to inject my chakra into this god tree. If anything unusual happens to me, separate me from it immediately. Bunpuku furrowed his brows, uncertainty flashing across his face, but seeing Rasa's resolute expression, he nodded firmly. I understand. Leave it to me, Kazekage-sama. Good. Only then did Rasa feel at ease. He trusted Bunpuku completely. Betrayal was the least of his concerns. With that resolve in mind, Rasa stepped forward, moving past the colossal statue and approaching the very heart of the seal, where the towering god tree stood. Its trunk was so thick that it would take at least 3 people to wrap their arms around it. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then, pressing his right palm, marked with the Kama seal, against the tree's ancient bark, he let out a slow breath. Logically, he didn't have to take this risk himself. He could have used an alternative chakra source, such as Shikaku, who was nearby. That would have been the safer choice. But Rasa wasn't just seeking an answer, he wanted to understand the truth behind this god tree on a deeper level. And so, his decision was made. A soft glow of chakra began radiating from his palm. As expected, The moment his chakra touched the bark, it was absorbed instantly, like a sponge greedily drinking up water. This reaction didn't just startle Rasa, even Bunpuku, standing beside him, widened his eyes in shock. However, as time passed, a hint of disappointment crept into Rasa's heart. Nothing was happening. Aside from the god tree absorbing his chakra, there was no other reaction, no strange visions, no sudden disturbances, no immediate changes. Just as he began to wonder if he had been overthinking things, that same feminine voice echoed in his ears once more. Chakra. Chakra. Strangely, although the voice itself remained unchanged, Rasa could now sense something else beneath its tone. A feeling of insufficiency. The chakra he had given her, it wasn't enough. Rasa furrowed his brows. Normally, with his cautious nature, he would never continue such a risky endeavor. However, the way the god tree absorbed his chakra felt different. Unlike the tentails described in the legends, it didn't display any hostility or aggression. It was gentle. That realization convinced him to push a little further. You want more chakra? Rasa narrowed his eyes, determination flashing within them. Fine. I'll give it to you. Let's see what you really are. With that thought, he activated Star Release, Chakra Mode. A powerful surge erupted from his body as a faint blue chakra cloak formed around him. His energy, no longer a mere trickle, now roared forward like a mighty river, flooding into the god tree. It absorbed everything. Then, time stopped. It was as if he had been caught in a genjutsu. The world around him twisted and warped, shifting uncontrollably. Space and time stretched into thin, elongated lines, spiraling into a chaotic loop. Yet, despite this eerie sensation, Rasa felt no discomfort. That allowed him to remain calm and collected, his mind focused on observing the changes around him. When the distortions finally settled, everything was gone. Time, space, light, sound, all of it had vanished, leaving him in an endless, dark void. It felt like floating in a boundless starry sky, yet there were no stars. Just a dead, infinite silence. Even though Rasa had always been mentally strong, his identity as a transmigrator giving him an advantage in adapting to this world, this emptiness filled him with an unsettling sense of loneliness. For the first time in a long while, he truly felt isolated. Just as he was about to question where he was, a bright light flared behind him. Instinctively, he turned around and witnessed something unbelievable. Before his very eyes, a massive, glowing green Rasengan floated in the void. What in the actual heck? Yes. A giant, green Rasengan. Rasa could feel it, an immense power surging within the glowing sphere, a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. This was not chakra. It carried a resemblance to natural energy, yet at its core, it was something entirely different. Curious, Rasa slowly extended his hand and lightly touched the radiant sphere. The moment his fingers made contact, a warm, gentle energy flooded into him, brimming with immense vitality. Rasa froze. He hadn't even processed what was happening yet when suddenly, the massive Rasengan began spinning faster, its rotation accelerating at an alarming rate, as if time itself had been set into motion. And then, it changed. It was evolving. The once simple sphere of energy twisted and reshaped itself, shifting into something far more complex. As the green Rasengan spun rapidly, land masses formed across its surface. Vast oceans followed, swirling with deep blue currents. Clouds drifted into existence, casting shadows over the terrain. Then, as if life had been breathed into this miniature world, plants began to sprout. Lush forests, rolling fields, and towering mountains emerged in the blink of an eye. Animals soon followed. Birds soared through the sky, while creatures of all shapes and sizes roamed the land and seas. And finally, humans. Before Rasa's very eyes, the Rasengan had transformed into a breathtaking, vibrant blue planet, alive, thriving, and teeming with existence. At that moment, an inexplicable thought surfaced in his mind. Could that mysterious voice just now have been the will of the world, the very consciousness spoken of in countless myths and legends? The scene that followed seemed to confirm Rasa's suspicions. On a peaceful planet where humans and animals coexisted in harmony, a meteor suddenly descended from the sky. This sight felt strangely familiar. Hadn't this been how the Otsutsuki clan arrived? As expected, the meteor crashed down with an earth-shattering impact. From the center of the devastation, a towering tree began to rise. A god tree. It looked eerily similar to the one Rasa had cultivated using dragon vein chakra. But the moment the tree emerged, an ominous crimson hue began to seep outward from its core, like ink spreading through the fabric of reality, slowly engulfing the entire planet. Before long, the once beautiful blue world was swallowed by a suffocating blood-red glow. And then, it appeared. A familiar sight manifested on the planet's surface. An eye. A terrifyingly familiar eye. A red Sharingan with 9 tomo. Kage Otsutsuki's eye? With its awakening, chaos and madness erupted across the once peaceful world. Rasa's vision pierced beyond the surface, revealing the world's very essence. At its core, the warm, gentle green energy that had once nurtured life was now tainted. Corrupted by the Otsutsuki's power, it raged violently, twisting and fracturing apart. Then, the green energy shattered into dozens of smaller orbs, each glowing with a unique hue. Meanwhile, countless streams of energy splintered off, weaving into the atmosphere like an intricate, sprawling web. These new energies carried an aura entirely different from the original life force. Among them, one sphere stood out, the largest of them all. It radiated a deep blue glow. And from it, Rasa finally sensed something familiar. Chakra. It pulsed, wild, ominous, and chilling. And within it, a woman's face, contorted with malice. Kage? Rasa's heart clenched. Beyond this massive blue sphere, 3 other large orbs stood out, one deep red, one dark green, and one light blue. Their energy. It felt akin to the power of the toads from Mount Maiboku. As for the smaller orbs scattered throughout the space, each radiating a different color, one, in particular, drew Rasa's attention. A familiar sensation pulsed from it. Dragon Vein Chakra. Chapter 70, Revelation and Change. The transformation unfolding across this world struck Rasa as eerily familiar. Kage Otsutsuki had been sealed away, the moon had emerged in the sky, and the god tree had vanished. The immense power of chakra had been passed down to humanity through the teachings of the Sage of 6 Paths, leading to the birth of ninjutsu. As time marched on, the world descended into the chaos of the Warring States period, where shinobi replaced samurai as the dominant force in warfare. As Rasa observed these changes, the structure of the shinobi world began to take shape before his eyes. The land of wind, the land of fire, the land of lightning, the land of earth, the land of water, the land of rain, and the land of rivers, all of them came into existence, their borders taking form. His gaze fell upon the land of wind, and in that moment, realization struck him. He finally understood why this land was nothing more than an endless desert. It was the birthplace of the god tree. When Kage Otsutsuki descended upon this world, the god tree had taken root there, greedily draining the land of its energy. What was once a thriving, verdant forest, much like the land of fire, had withered away, leaving behind an arid wasteland. As history unfolded, shinobi villages began to rise: Sunagakure, Konoha, Kumogakure, Iwagakure, Kirigakure, and Amigakure. The shinobi world plunged into turmoil as war after war erupted. And then, when it seemed chaos had already reached its peak, a meteor descended from the heavens. At first, Rasa assumed it was yet another member of the Otsutsuki clan arriving. But when the meteor crashed into the ground and transformed into a small, glowing humanoid figure, he was utterly stunned. Because that figure was himself. Then, something truly astonishing occurred. The soul that had transmigrated into this world, his soul, seemed to possess a purifying force. The chakra within the original Rasa's body, upon being taken over, underwent an extraordinary transformation. Its impurities were stripped away, reverting it to the pure green energy that had existed at the dawn of the world. But the purified energy did not remain stable for long. The new chakra generated by his body resisted the change, surging forward to taint the purified energy once more. In response, the pure energy began to gather, condensing in his palm until it took the shape of a black, diamond-shaped mark. It was in that moment that Rasa finally understood the origin of the Kama seal on his hand. And strangely enough, something about this process reminded him of a concept from a game he had once played, Elder Gods and Outer Gods. And no idea what this game is. If anyone knows, please comment. Elder Gods were the native deities of a world. Outer Gods, however, were entities from beyond. Clearly, the force revealing all of this to Rasa was akin to an Elder God, one that had been tainted by the power of an Outer God from another world, the Otsutsuki clan. As a transmigrator, Rasa possessed a soul capable of purifying that corruption. What happened next confirmed his suspicions and resolved some lingering doubts. A glowing exclamation mark suddenly appeared above the little Rasa's head. It was just like an NPC in a game offering a quest. This consciousness, similar to an elder god, truly had the ability to peer into his memories and thoughts. This also explained the appearance of the magnet fruit. It must have been drawn from his recollections of One Piece. The vision shifted again, replaying everything Rasa had done since arriving in this world. As the Kama seal absorbed Shikaku's chakra, the chakra of the stars, and the chakra of the dragon vein, the Otsutsuki tainted energy within them had been purified. Meanwhile, the green energy inside Rasa continued to grow stronger until it finally became powerful enough to rival chakra itself. Then came the pivotal moment. Rasa had planted the dragon vein chakra fruit in the desert. A new seed of green energy had been sown into this world. With the god tree formed from this green seed as its core, the chakra of the dragon vein had undergone a gradual purification. 3 days ago, the process had finally been completed. The energy sphere that once represented the dragon vein's chakra had been entirely transformed into pure green energy. At the same time, a magnet fruit, identical to the one from One Piece, had appeared on the god tree. The other Rasa, the one within the vision, plucked the fruit and ate it. The exclamation mark above his head vanished. It was exactly like completing a quest in a game and receiving a reward. Interesting. Rasa understood what this consciousness was trying to convey. It wanted to make a deal. If he continued to purify the forces corrupted by the Otsutsuki, it would reward him with powers similar to One Piece's devil fruits. This deal, however, felt unfair. Simply by using the power of the Kama seal, he could already acquire similar abilities on his own. He did not necessarily need these chakra fruits. As a transmigrator, Rasa did not concern himself with morality. Whether power was right or wrong, good or evil, did not matter to him. Power was only meaningful if it could be wielded effectively. But was there truly a difference between these chakra fruits and his own bloodline limit? Could they actually grant abilities identical to One Piece's devil fruits? Just as this thought crossed his mind, the world around him shifted again. His body plummeted from space, hurtling toward the ground. At that moment, a voice echoed in his ears. In an instant, he snapped awake. Everything returned to normal. He was once again standing beside the god tree, his right hand pressed against its trunk. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion settled over him, heavier than anything he had felt before. Bunpuku's voice still rang in his ears. Rasa steadied himself and raised his right hand. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Bunpuku hesitated, but the reassurance eased his concern, though uncertainty still lingered in his gaze. Was Rasa truly fine? Of course not. At that very moment, he realized something that darkened his expression. His chakra was gone. Not drained. Not sealed. But completely absent. His body could no longer generate even the smallest trace of chakra. For a moment, he stood there in stunned silence. Before he could fully comprehend what had happened, he became aware of something else. A different kind of energy pulsed within him, radiating an overwhelming vitality. This energy was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It surpassed both chakra and natural energy in sheer potency. And yet, it felt eerily familiar. It was the same green energy he had seen in the illusion, the primordial energy from the dawn of the world. Realization struck him. Was this consciousness trying to guide him? Urging him to abandon chakra and embrace this power instead? Feeling the immense life force contained within it. It did not seem like a bad trade-off. Even so, his brows remained tightly furrowed. Stripping his chakra away without his consent, wasn't that a little too forceful? As if responding to his dissatisfaction, the branches of the god tree above him began to tremble. A fruit emerged from the canopy, its shape resembling a cactus. Rasa's eyes narrowed. It was the Sunasuna no Mi, the Sansan fruit. And, okay, I know some of you may be furious, but trust me, he will gain something even more overpowered in the future. Besides, this won't change much. Sunagakure, Kazekage's office. For the first time in over 2 months, Kazekage Rasa was late to an important village meeting. However, unlike before, none of the attendees voiced any complaints. After fighting alongside him for 2 months, they had gradually come to acknowledge him as their Kazekage. His presence commanded respect, and his leadership was no longer in question. The atmosphere in the room was also noticeably lighter, thanks to the presence of 2 women. One was Karura, the Kazekage's wife. The other was Queen Saramu of Roran. Both had been summoned here by Rasa himself. As the saying goes, 3 women make a drama. Karura was well liked in the village for her kind and gentle nature. Even Pakura, who had once harbored resentment toward Rasa, could not bring herself to say anything bad about Karura, let alone Chio. As for Saramu, she had been working hard to integrate into this unfamiliar environment. With Karura's support, the people of Roran had begun relocating to Sunagakure over the past few days. For the sake of her people's future, she made an effort to connect with the other women, despite being an outsider. With Karura facilitating the conversation and both Chio and Pakura understanding that Rasa must have had his reasons for bringing Saramu here, they treated her with courtesy. The discussion remained light, filled with small talk rather than tension. As time passed, they continued chatting, waiting for Rasa's arrival. After more than an hour, the sound of familiar footsteps echoed from the corridor. The Kazekage-sama has arrived. The moment Rasa stepped into the office, clad in his Kazekage robes, the entire room fell silent. Every senior official of Sunagakure, including Karura, froze for a moment. They could all sense it. Something about Rasa had changed. Chapter 71, Senjutsu Energy. In the world of ninjas, where chakra is the foundation of power, the strength of nearly all shinobi is raw and unfiltered, radiating from within. This is determined by the very nature of chakra itself. Formed by refining both spiritual and physical energy within a ninja's body, chakra flows and is stored in a remarkably simple manner before being released through ninjutsu. As a result, most ninjas with sensory abilities can perceive the chakra within their opponents and use it to gauge their strength. For example, when facing Rasa, the Kazekage, even the Jonin of Sunagakure could faintly sense the surging chakra within him, even if he didn't make a move. This was proof of his overwhelming power. The same could be said for the high-ranking officials of Sunagakure currently gathered in the Kazekage's office. Chio, Ebizo, Pakura, Michikawa, and his wife, Karura, all of them were ninjas capable of taking on hundreds, even thousands, by themselves. Their sensory abilities were exceptionally sharp, honed through years of experience. Yet, at this very moment, as they looked at Rasa sitting before them, they all felt something strange. Although the Kazekage was right in front of them, their senses returned an eerie emptiness, as if there were nothing there at all. Or rather, it felt as if the person sitting in the Kazekage's seat was an ordinary man, one who possessed not even a single trace of chakra. Was that possible? Of course not. And considering that Rasa had arrived an hour late to this meeting, there could only be one explanation. Something had happened to Rasa, something even they were unaware of, preventing them from sensing his chakra. In that moment, everyone's gazes were fixed on the Kazekage in astonishment. However, neither Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, nor Michikawa questioned him further. Ever since the surprise attack on Konoha, Rasa had already given them far too many unexpected surprises. In truth, it wasn't just them who were shocked. Rasa himself was equally astounded by the changes in his body. After an hour of experimentation and acclimatization, he had come to a basic understanding of his transformation. Simply put, he could no longer refine or use chakra. That meant all chakra-based ninjutsu and even his bloodline limits were beyond his reach. However, as a substitute, he could now directly absorb and store the senjutsu energy of nature itself as his new source of power. Yes, senjutsu energy. That was the name Rasa had chosen for this world's primordial, verdant energy. And to replace his former bloodline limits, his magnet release, his sand manipulation, and his vaporization technique, Rasa had consumed 2 chakra fruits from the god tree, the magnet fruit and the sand fruit, granting him a new form of power. He called it senjutsu limit, a bloodline limit that utilized senjutsu energy instead of chakra. After consuming the 2 chakra fruits, Rasa regained access to senjutsu limit, magnet release and senjutsu limit, sand manipulation. To be honest, even now, Rasa wasn't entirely sure, had he grown stronger? Or weaker? Although senjutsu limit, magnet release and senjutsu limit, sand manipulation felt noticeably stronger than their original bloodline limits when Rasa tested them, there were significant changes to consider. First, he no longer needed to refine chakra or fuse 2 different chakra natures to create magnetism for controlling gold dust. Instead, the process was completely bypassed, his senjutsu energy inherently carried magnetism. This not only saved him the effort of refining chakra, reducing energy consumption and making control more convenient, but it also expanded his ability to manipulate metals. He was no longer limited to controlling gold dust. He could now manipulate the iron sand that the Third Kazekage had once been so proud of. Second, senjutsu limit, sand manipulation granted him an elemental ability, allowing him to ignore most taijutsu in this world. This compensated for his previous weakness in close combat, giving him a significant advantage against physical fighters. Finally, because senjutsu energy was fundamentally different from chakra, Rasa discovered that ordinary jinjutsu no longer worked on him. This eliminated his greatest weakness, his susceptibility to illusions. However, he was still unsure whether he could resist dojutsu like the Sharingan, which operated on a higher level of complexity. Of course, senjutsu energy didn't come without drawbacks. The biggest issue was that all of his previously mastered 5 elements ninjutsu, sealing techniques, and clone techniques were now completely unusable. This left Rasa feeling somewhat restricted, as he lost many tactical options in battle and could now rely only on his 2 senjutsu limits. Additionally, despite the power of his elemental ability, this was still a world governed by ninjutsu and the 5 elemental affinities. This meant there were still techniques capable of countering him, especially those that exploited elemental weaknesses or required intricate chakra manipulation. Fortunately, some fundamental abilities of special energies were retained. The curse mark power from Shikaku's chakra, as well as abilities from the Dragon Vein chakra, such as inorganic reincarnation, matter transformation, accelerated regeneration, and chakra absorption, remained functional through senjutsu energy. However, one unfortunate loss was the power of star release chakra, which had completely disappeared. This meant that, aside from Pakura, Michikawa, Baki, and Yashimaru, star release mode had become a thing of the past. Still, overall, Rasa felt that he had become stronger. Because no matter what world one was in, physical strength was the foundation of everything. And just like the spiritual energy, chi, in cultivation novels, senjutsu energy possessed incredible vitality, continuously nurturing and strengthening his body. With the powerful life force of senjutsu energy nourishing him, Rasa hadn't expected to develop a body as invincible as the monsters from One Piece. However, he hoped to at least achieve a physique comparable to Hashirama Senju's sage body. Additionally, chakra-based techniques were completely ineffective against the Otsutsuki clan. Fighting them with chakra was like tossing neat buns at a dog, utterly useless. But with Senjutsu energy, the situation was different. Now, Rasa had a way to confront the Otsutsuki in the future. Yet, there was one more unknown factor to consider. Rasa's maximum capacity for Senjutsu energy was only half of what his chakra reserves had been. While he could replenish his energy by absorbing Senjutsu energy from nature, the natural energy in this world had only just begun to recover. Aside from the area around the God Tree, where the concentration was higher, the rest of the ninja world remained barren, making regeneration painfully slow. Fortunately, as Rasa continued to use the Kama seal to absorb and convert chakra into Senjutsu energy, the world's Senjutsu energy concentration would slowly rise. However, as a reincarnator, Rasa was determined not to depend on external sources of power. True strength, he believed, could only come from within. Therefore, he needed to overcome his body's limits to store even more Senjutsu energy. Using the Kama seal to enhance his physique seemed like the most obvious solution, but Rasa was someone who preferred to rely on himself. After all, the God Tree had already taken his chakra without his permission, which had left him greatly displeased. Now, only one plan remained in his mind. Perhaps he could treat Senjutsu energy like spiritual energy, chi, in cultivation novels and train it as a cultivator would. But nope! He didn't want to become some sex elder with an inflated ego, cleaning up the mess after his subordinates. Besides, that task was for the future. Right now, with war looming, his immediate priority was managing the village. As these thoughts settled in his mind, Rasa gently tapped his fingers on the desk, bringing everyone's attention back from their shock. Apologies for the delay. Now, let's get down to business. Chapter 72, Announcement. First, I have an important announcement to make. Rasa's gaze swept over the small group in the room before finally resting on Saramu. As you may already be aware, the people of Roran have now joined our village, Sunagakure. While we cannot hold a welcoming ceremony for them due to the looming war, I trust that all of you here will help guide the villagers and ensure their smooth integration. His eyes shifted to the rest of the room. Additionally, Saramu, as the former queen of Roran, has outstanding abilities in governance. It would be a waste not to make use of such talent. I have decided that she will join the upper ranks of our village. As soon as the words left Rasa's mouth, Saramu's eyes widened in shock, quickly giving way to joy. If she could become a high-ranking member of Sunagakure, it would greatly help her people settle into the village. However, Rasa's words caused some unease among the other high-ranking officials present. First, Sunagakure, being a relatively small village, had limited positions of power. Bringing in a new member would undoubtedly affect the interests of others. Second, Saramu, while skilled in harnessing the energy of the dragon vein, was not a formidable kunoichi. Despite her past as queen, she lacked combat abilities, and in a shinobi village, the distinction between shinobi and ordinary citizens was clear. It was rare for non-shinobi to rise to high positions. Fortunately, Rasa was not the same as he had been 2 months ago. His standing in the village had significantly improved, especially after the success of the Three Kage summit. As a result, after his announcement, the officials exchanged glances but remained silent. It was Michikawa, a representative of the noble faction, who finally spoke after a brief pause. Kazekage-sama, where do you intend to place Lady Saramu? Rasa did not plan to immediately assign her to a high-ranking position. Instead, he offered a carefully thought-out plan. At first, she will serve as my assistant in my office, helping with village affairs. Once she becomes more familiar with the village, we will find a more appropriate role for her. Saramu, what are your thoughts on this? Naturally, Saramu did not object. As a member of the village, I am willing to serve in any capacity. Since the position was merely an assistant to the Kazekage, a personal role, no one voiced any objections. Very well. From this point on, Saramu, you should take your time to learn about the village. Karura will be there to assist you. Karura smiled kindly at both her husband and Saramu, giving a subtle nod. With Saramu's role settled, the conversation turned to the topic of the upcoming war. Sunagakure had long been ready for an official war against Sunagakure. There was little need for further discussion, all that was left was to execute the plan. However, as Rasa detailed the specifics, the officials began to sense something different about him. He appeared genuinely furious this time. It didn't take long for them to understand why. Sunagakure has underestimated us for far too long. They have never given us an explanation for the death of the Third Kazekage, and now, they have attempted to assassinate me. I believe it's time to make them remember who they're dealing with. The group nodded in agreement, no objections. After all, an attempt on the Kazekage's life was nothing less than a slap in the face to every shinobi of Sunagakure. However, Kazekage-sama, how do you plan to respond? Ebizo asked calmly. Rasa's answer was nothing short of shocking. It's simple. This time, I want to completely annihilate the Konoha forces that come to challenge us. In that instant, everyone, including Karura, stared at him in disbelief. Their eyes were wide, mouths slightly open, unsure of how to react. Only Saramu appeared confused, not fully grasping the magnitude of Rasa's words. Rasa's ambition was immense. The idea of utterly destroying Konoha's forces had been a thought shared by many in Sunagakure, but it was an ambition that had never been realized in history. Something like this. Is it even possible? Michikawa and Ebizo looked visibly shaken. Pakura, ever direct, cut to the heart of the matter. What's your plan? Rasa turned to Saramu and spoke, his tone serious. From this point forward, listen to me closely. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, as I will be explaining the strategy. Saramu, slightly nervous, nodded. Karura kindly handed her a notebook, signaling for her to take notes. With that, Rasa shifted his gaze to the others and began. First, I am calling this operation the Konoha Annihilation Plan. The name alone made the air grow tense, and everyone in the room held their breath. This mission requires an even higher level of secrecy than our last raid on the Land of Fire. Everything shared in this room today must remain strictly confidential. If any of you leaks this information, you will be treated as a traitor. Your subordinates only need to know their specific roles, nothing more. During the previous raid on the Land of Fire, Rasa had not possessed the authority to issue such strict orders. Now, however, everyone understood the gravity of the situation and nodded solemnly in response. The Konoha Annihilation Plan can be broken down into a series of actions designed to deceive Konoha, giving them a false sense of security. We'll gradually lead them into our carefully constructed trap, and in the end, deliver a crushing blow. To accomplish this, the operation will unfold in 3 phases. Rasa began outlining the details of the plan. The first phase, which I call the Deception Plan, follows the approach of our original strategy. Pakura and Michikawa will each lead 800 shinobi into the Land of Rivers and engage Konoha's forces in battle. You will have full freedom to choose your tactics, but there's only one condition: neither victory nor defeat. Neither victory nor defeat? Both Pakura and Michikawa were taken aback, unsure of Rasa's exact intentions. Rasa explained further. Much like our last raid on the Land of Fire, you must make Konoha believe that we aren't interested in an all-out war. Instead, they should think we're just stalling for time. Pakura's eyes lit up in understanding. I see. But after they've fallen for our deception once before, do you really think Konoha will take the bait again? Rasa smirked and raised a finger. That brings us to the second phase, the Reassurance Plan. During this phase, I will intentionally leak certain details about our dealings with Kumogakure and Iwagakure. If needed, we can even plant false intelligence. The officials in the room looked around with realization. Michikawa nodded, impressed. A brilliant move. Konoha will definitely want to avoid overcommitting their forces against us. If we do this right, they'll lower their guard and send fewer troops. Pakura nodded as well but added. Even so, completely wiping out Konoha's forces won't be easy. Given the shinobi's ability to travel across land, sea, and sky, as well as their advanced intelligence networks, even with reduced numbers, completely annihilating them would still present a monumental challenge. Rasa's eyes gleamed with anticipation as he responded. That's where the third phase comes in, the bait plan. Bait? Yes, but to make this phase work, we'll need a bit of luck. Luck? Rasa's cryptic tone left everyone wondering about his next move. Just then, a knock echoed through the room. The door to the office opened, and Baki entered, bowing respectfully as the gathered officials turned their attention to him. Kazekage-sama, we've received word from the advanced scouting units. The commander leading Konoha's forces against us is Danzo. Oh? It seems that luck is on Sunagakure's side after all. The satisfaction in Rasa's voice was evident, and everyone in the room could feel it. But Baki wasn't finished. He continued. There's one more thing, the Uchiha clan has also joined the battle. Chapter 73, The Uchiha Clan. Since the Second Great Ninja War, the Uchiha clan had gradually become isolated within Konoha, especially after the death of Kagami Uchiha, the only member of their clan to ever hold a position in Konoha's upper ranks. This isolation was caused by two main factors. The first was Konoha's systematic suppression of the Uchiha clan. The second was the Uchiha's overwhelming pride as once the greatest clan in the ninja world, a pride that only grew as the Senju clan declined. This pride led most of the Uchiha to place their clan's interests above the village's. As a result, the Uchiha became increasingly defiant toward Konoha's leadership, an act that was intolerable to any ruling authority. Take the current war, for example. Months had passed since it began, yet Uchiha shinobi were scarcely seen on the battlefield. Rumors even spread that the Uchiha were waiting for Konoha to weaken, intending to seize the opportunity for a coup at the perfect moment. These rumors wiped out the little goodwill the Uchiha had earned after the truth of Danzo's secret Sharingan experiments came to light. Instead of being seen as victims, the Uchiha were now painted as villains. The village responded by tightening their surveillance of the clan. This only intensified the Uchiha's resentment toward Konoha, making their involvement in the war even less likely. But then, everything changed when Namikaze Minato personally visited Fugaku Uchiha, the clan leader. No one knew what was said during that meeting. However, after it, despite fierce opposition within his clan, Fugaku ordered the Uchiha to join the war. The Uchiha, though the most powerful clan in the ninja world, had a complex internal structure with many factions. Even so, Fugaku still commanded considerable authority, and many of the clan's most formidable shinobi followed his orders. With the Uchiha joining the fight, Konoha's pressure on the battlefield immediately began to ease. Land of Rivers. A country nestled between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind, the Land of Rivers was true to its name, filled with numerous rivers, some flowing, others long dried up. These dry riverbeds had become natural hiding spots. Ever since Sunagakure declared war on Konoha, both Sand and Leaf Shinobi had been using these riverbeds for troop movements and supply transports. 7 days had passed since Sunagakure's official declaration of war against Konoha. During this time, countless skirmishes erupted across the Land of Rivers. But a closer look would reveal that Sunagakure was not truly engaging in full-scale war. Nonetheless, these skirmishes managed to tie up a portion of Konoha's forces in the Land of Rivers, creating a perfect opportunity for Kumogakure and Iwagakure, who eagerly launched large-scale invasions into the Land of Fire. Unlike Sunagakure, which was still engaging Konoha in a calculated battle within the Land of Rivers, the battle-hungry forces of Kumogakure had already advanced deep into the Land of Fire in just 7 days. Iwagakure, ever the opportunist, seized the chance to push forward, occupying nearly a third of Konoha's territory. The situation in the Land of Fire was growing more dire. Land of Rivers, a dried riverbed. A Konoha supply convoy slowly made its way forward. Hurry up! We need to reach the camp before nightfall. The one shouting was a Konoha Jonin from the Aburame clan, Fuka Aburame. Dressed in the clan's signature long robe and dark sunglasses, he was in charge of escorting the supply mission. Yes, sir. The convoy quickened its pace, but not by much. Most of the people transporting supplies were ordinary civilians, lacking the speed and agility of shinobi. Realizing that yelling wouldn't help much, Fuka Aburi made his way toward the center of the convoy, where 3 shinobi clad in Uchiha clan attire walked. Unlike most of their clansmen, who carried an air of arrogance, these 3 Uchiha had relatively mild expressions. Remembering Minato's instructions, Fuka Aburi softened his tone and addressed the youngest among them, a boy who appeared barely old enough for the academy. "Shursui, how are you holding up? Can you handle the battlefield?" Even as he spoke, Fuka Aburi couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. Shursui was only 8 years old. If this were a normal time, he'd just be starting school. Yet here he was, already a genin. A true Uchiha prodigy. But sending a child to war, it was cruel. Then again, Konoha had no other choice. With battles raging on 3 fronts, the village was being crushed under immense pressure. Unlike the Jonin's somber thoughts, Shursui, experiencing life beyond the village for the first time, looked eager. He smiled gently and said, "Don't worry, Fuka-senpai. I'll be fine. I want to do my part for the village." "Haha, no need to overdo it. Right now, your biggest priority is staying alive." Fuka Aburi chuckled before nodding toward the 2 Uchiha Chunin beside Shursui. "I'm counting on you too." The Chunin exchanged complicated looks before giving slight nods. The convoy continued moving forward. Shursui glanced at the towering riverbanks on either side, his sharp eyes analyzing the terrain. "Fuka-senpai, why are we taking this route? If the enemy attacks from above, wouldn't we be trapped and completely vulnerable?" Fuka gave him an approving look. "As expected of a Uchiha genius. You've got a good eye. Unfortunately, we don't have much choice." Shursui blinked. "No choice?" "That's right. The land of rivers has a complex terrain, mostly rivers and mountains, with very few flat plains. Compared to rough mountain paths, the dried riverbeds are far easier to travel. Especially with so many supply carts, oxen, and wagons. There's no way they'd make it through the mountains." Fuka added. "But don't worry too much. The rivers here crisscross like a giant web. The sand ninja would have a hard time tracking us down." Shursui nodded in understanding. But just as he relaxed, Fuka Aburi suddenly turned toward the front of the convoy, his voice growing wary. "No way, are we really that unlucky? Everyone, stop and stay on guard." At that moment, every member of the convoy realized Sunagakure's ambush had arrived. Shursui tensed. This was his first time facing enemy ninja. And then, boom! 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 Explosions erupted along both sides of the riverbanks. "It's explosive tags!" Someone shouted in alarm. The next instant, the riverbanks collapsed. A rain of boulders and dirt came crashing down. For the shinobi, avoiding the falling debris was easy, they leapt to safety in an instant. But the civilians weren't so lucky. Within moments, they were crushed, buried under the landslide. Their screams of terror and agony filled the air. Suspended in midair, Shursui Uchiha looked down at the carnage below, at the sheer brutality of war. For the first time, he truly understood the meaning of battlefield cruelty. Chapter 74, Despair. "Ah, my leg. Help me." Cough, cough. The relentless explosions had collapsed the riverbanks, cutting off the entire ravine. The scene was one of chaos and despair. Some were buried alive under the rubble. Others had their legs crushed by falling debris. A few, caught in the shockwaves, coughed up blood as their lives slowly slipped away. Shursui Uchiha's dark eyes widened in shock. This was the first time he had witnessed such devastation up close. The cries of the wounded, the blood-soaked earth, the broken bodies, it was overwhelming. His heart ached, and his instincts screamed at him to act. He wanted to jump down and save them. But before he could move, a fellow Uchiha clan member grabbed his arm firmly. "Where do you think you're going?" the older Uchiha demanded. "I have to save them." Shursui protested, his voice filled with urgency. The older Uchiha shook his head, his gaze cold and unyielding. They're already beyond saving. If you go down there, you'll just end up like them. But we can't just stand here and watch them die. They're our fellow villagers. Shursui argued, his voice trembling with emotion. The Chunin's expression remained unchanged. His tone was calm, yet it carried a chilling weight. Look closely, Shursui. You are not a god. This is war. Life is fragile here. Shursui's pupils constricted. His small frame trembled slightly, but he didn't take another step forward. The words struck him deeply, and for a moment, he felt paralyzed by the harsh reality of the situation. Around him, the other Konoha shinobi stood helpless, their faces etched with frustration and anger. Against the sheer destructive force of the explosions, there was little they could do but hide and curse their powerlessness. Damn it! How many explosive tags did the Sunagakure shinobi plant? The explosions raged on for a full 3 minutes before finally subsiding. Yet, even as silence followed, the Konoha forces remained on edge, weapons drawn, waiting for an ambush. But the attack never came. The smoke began to clear, and all that remained was the wreckage, no enemy in sight. Captain Aburi. All eyes shifted to Fuka Aburi. He felt the messages his insects were sending, and, gritting his teeth, he replied. Sunagakure didn't advance. A heavy sigh escaped his lips as he gazed down at the devastation below. Search for survivors. It looks like we'll have to find another route. The rest of the journey was silent. No one spoke. The weight of war had settled deeply into their hearts. Even Shursui Uchiha, once so full of energy, now remained quiet. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached Konoha's outpost in the Land of Rivers, Tsurumura Castle. And, I believe it's an original location since I've never heard of it in Naruto. Alright, I'll arrange a place for you all to rest, Fuka Aburi said. I need to report to Danzo-sama. The mention of that name caused the three Uchiha to tense. The relief they had felt upon reaching the camp immediately evaporated. Thank you for your help, one of the Chunin said, his voice stiff. Fuka Aburi nodded. Of course, he understood their reaction. The tensions between the Uchiha and Danzo Shimura were no secret. Personally, Fuka sympathized with the Uchiha. His older brother, Aburi Shibi, was a close friend of Minato Namikaze. As a high-ranking member of the Aburi clan, Fuka knew all too well the kind of man Danzo was. But, for the sake of the village, he kept those thoughts buried deep within. The moment Fuka stepped into the command tent, a cold, oppressive atmosphere settled over him. At the center sat Danzo Shimura, Konoha's notorious spymaster. Beside him stood Ryoma Aburi, one of Danzo's most trusted subordinates, an Aburi who had defected to Root long ago. Perhaps because of this bond, the village had assigned Fuka Aburi's unit to assist Danzo, despite Fuka wanting nothing to do with him. The tension in the air was palpable, as it always was in Danzo's presence. Though they were all Konoha shinobi fighting for the same cause, the shadow of Danzo turned the room into a silent battlefield. It was Shibi Aburi, the head of the Aburi clan, who finally broke the silence. You're here, Fuka. I heard you were attacked by Sunagakure. Fuka hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yes, but as before, the Sunagakure shinobi only harassed us and then retreated. Danzo, his face as unreadable as ever, finally spoke, his voice cold and precise. It seems our intelligence was accurate. Fuka's frown deepened in confusion. Sensing his confusion, Ryoma Aburi spoke up, offering clarification. We just confirmed it. Sunagakure has no intention of engaging us directly in combat. What? Fuka's confusion only deepened. Shibi stepped in to explain further. According to intelligence from our spies in Sunagakure, Kimogakure, and Iwagakure, the recent 3 Kage summit resulted in an agreement. The Fourth Kazekage convinced the Raikage and Tsuchikage that Sunagakure would not commit its forces fully to the war. Instead, Sunagakure will only engage Konoha in limited skirmishes, using mercenaries rather than their own shinobi. Mercenaries? Fuka repeated. Yes, Shibi confirmed. Kumogakure and Iwagakure will issue missions to Sunagakure, who will complete them for payment, rather than formally declaring war. Fuka blinked, taken aback by the revelation. I see. I never expected Kumo and IWA to agree to such a deal. This new Kazekage is more cunning than we thought. Danzo's sharp gaze narrowed at that. His expression remained impassive as he spoke in his usual, emotionless tone. This benefits Konoha. Shibi nodded in agreement. If Sunagakure isn't looking for a full confrontation, then we don't need to force one either. We should instruct our shinobi to hold back unless absolutely necessary. Danzo, despite his ruthless nature, was not a warmonger. His true goal wasn't simply to fight for Konoha, he was here to uncover the secrets hidden in the Kazekage's plans. If a full battle could be avoided, it only made sense to conserve their forces. Though always cautious of Danzo, Shibi felt a sense of relief at this decision. But then, Danzo suddenly steered the conversation in a new direction. Shursui Uchiha, the prodigy of the Uchiha clan. He has arrived, hasn't he? Meanwhile, in Sunagakure, a vast, ever-expanding oasis stretched before them, Dragon's Oasis, a new land personally named by the Fourth Kazekage, Rasa. It was no ordinary oasis. The divine tree at its core pulsed with pure Senjutsu energy, transforming the barren desert into a lush, vibrant green. Every day, the oasis grew, and the changes were nothing short of astonishing. Bunpuku, the Jinchuriki of Shikaku, was left stunned each morning by the rapid growth. Baki, the head of the Umbu in Sunagakure, felt even more unnerved. The deeper he observed Rasa's work, the more he sensed that the Kazekage was beyond human comprehension. As for Rasa himself? For the past 7 days, he had immersed himself in relentless training within this sacred land. Apart from returning home at night to be with his wife, every waking moment was spent here. His sole focus? Mastering Senjutsu. His chakra reserves, once vast, were now only half of what they had been. That was unacceptable. Rasa knew that to proceed with his next plans, he needed to push beyond his current limitations. But how? With no clear answers, he resorted to the only option he had, return to the basics. He forced his body to its limits with intensive taijutsu training, using Senjutsu energy to refine his physique, pushing his body to evolve. After a week, the results were evident. His physical strength had improved, and his capacity for Senjutsu energy had expanded. But it still wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The progress was too slow. The efficiency was too low. At his current level, he had already reached the peak of what most shinobi would consider kage level. But his future enemies were far beyond that. Otsutsuki level. 6 paths level. If he wanted to stand among gods, minor improvements would never suffice. There was a shortcut. Bunpuku. If he could convert Shikaku's chakra into pure Senjutsu energy, the results would be nothing short of staggering. Not only would his body undergo a radical transformation, but the world's Senjutsu energy would rise exponentially. But there was a problem. A serious problem. The Sage of 6 Paths was still watching. That ancient specter lurked in the shadows, silently observing the world. Rasa had no intention of drawing his attention, at least not yet. It wasn't time to take that risk. For now, he would have to find another method. Something faster. Something more efficient. Chapter 75, The Land of Grass. The Land of Grass. A small nation ensnared in a web of danger. Surrounded by the land of fire, the land of earth, the land of rain, and the land of waterfall, each posing its own threat. The land of fire and the land of earth were undisputed great powers. The land of rain, though small, had produced Hanzo of the Salamander, the legendary demigod who had shaken the world during the Second Shinobi War. The land of waterfall? Though seemingly insignificant, it possessed a tailed beast. With such formidable neighbors, the land of grass had survived only by mastering the art of diplomacy, skillfully navigating the tensions between them to ensure its continued existence. But now, with the land of Earth launching a full-scale invasion into the land of Fire, the land of Grass was no longer the battlefield between the two giants. For the first time in years, there was peace. Or so it seemed. Unbeknownst to the world, the Fourth Kazekage, Rasa, had entered the land of Grass under the cover of night. Alongside him were 9 elite members of Suna's secret mobile corps. Upon crossing the border, 3 more agents, already embedded in the land of Grass, emerged from the shadows. Their codenames, Sand Rat, Black Scorpion, and Red Thistle, each named after deadly creatures of the desert. Kazekage-sama. We move while we talk. Understood. A team of 12 jonin, led by the Kazekage himself. This was no ordinary mission. As they sprinted through the dense forest, Black Scorpion, the most physically imposing of the 3 scouts, reported their findings. Kazekage-sama, we've located the woman you asked us to investigate. She is from the Uzumaki clan. Her name is Hana Uzumaki. At the mention of the Uzumaki clan, the 9 masked agents tensed. The Uzumaki had been all but wiped out. Why would the Kazekage be searching for one? Black Scorpion continued. After the destruction of Sunagakure, Hana wandered into the land of Grass, where she was secretly taken in by Sunagakure. Why? Rasa asked, though he already knew the answer. Because she has a unique ability. Any injured shinobi who bites her skin can instantly heal their wounds and restore their chakra. It is said she can even save those on the brink of death. The revelation sent shockwaves through the squad. Rasa, however, remained calm, his expression unchanged. Does she have any living relatives? Any other Uzumaki? No, Kazekage-sama. Hana is only 13 or 14 years old. Rasa lightly bit his finger, his mind turning over the information. I see. That means Karen has not been born yet. This was valuable information. Where did you learn this? Kazekage-sama, Sunagakure is riddled with corruption. Money can buy almost anything. Black Scorpion's tone grew darker. More importantly, there's a growing division within Sunagakure itself. The village is controlled by 2 opposing factions. The first is the war faction, calling themselves Grass Fruit, the Grass Fruit. They seek to strengthen the village through conflict and expansion. The second is the anti-war faction, known as Grass Flower, the Grass Flower. With the world at war, they have steadily lost influence. Currently, Grass Fruit holds most of the power, while Grass Flower is being suppressed. Rasa processed the information quietly. So, Grass Flower is desperate for support. Black Scorpion nodded. Yes, Kazekage-sama. We've already made contact with members of Grass Flower. In exchange for our backing, they provided us with this intelligence. Oh? Well done. Rasa's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. It seems my plan can proceed even more smoothly than expected. The 12 shinobi exchanged glances. Until now, Rasa had kept the purpose of this mission secret. But now, he saw no reason to withhold it any longer. It's time. His voice was calm, but it carried an unmistakable authority. Our objective is simple: we attack Sunagakure and take Hana Uzumaki with us. The 12 jonin, all highly intelligent, instantly connected the dots. With the ongoing war, Sunagakure's tailed beast, Shikaku, needed a new host. The current Jinchuriki was too old to continue serving as a weapon. That explained why even the Kazekage himself had mobilized for this mission. However, Kazekage-sama, if we only need Hana Uzumaki, we can use our connections with Grass Flower to have them smuggle her out quietly. No. Rasa shook his head firmly. If that were our only goal, I wouldn't be here personally. We have another mission, one just as important. We are going to be bait. Bait? That was never a good word to hear during a mission briefing. Yes. Our real target is Konoha's commander in the land of rivers, Danzo. A heavy silence fell over the group. Danzo. the man who had orchestrated the assassination of the Third Kazekage and even attempted to eliminate Rasa himself. And now, the Kazekage was planning to strike back. Rasa didn't feel the need to elaborate further. Instead, he gave direct orders. We will launch a full-scale assault on Kazekage, forcing them to hand over Hana Uzumaki. In the meantime, I need you to use your contacts within the village to convince Kazekage's leader to request help from Danzo. Can you do that? The 12 shinobi now fully understood Rasa's true strategy. Sandrat, responsible for contacting Kazekage's leadership, thought for a moment before nodding. It won't be difficult. The hostility between Kazekage's factions is severe. If we assist Grass Flower in eliminating some key members of Grass Fruit, they will be willing to cooperate. But Kazekage-sama, let us handle the diversion. There's no need for you to risk yourself. Of course, Rasa had no intention of taking that risk. In truth, he had no interest in eliminating Danzo. Danzo was like a poison, slowly rotting Konoha from the inside, exactly what Rasa wanted. However, Danzo possessed something far more valuable to him. Hashirama's cells. Sharingan. And most importantly, at this point in time, he did not yet possess Shirsui's eye. His power was at its lowest. This was an opportunity too tempting to ignore. No. Whether it is revenge for the Third Kazekage, or justice for his attempt on my life, this village deserves an answer. Since Konoha refuses to give us one, we will take it ourselves. Understood. Seeing Rasa's unyielding resolve, the 12 Jonin could only obey. Just then, Red Thistle, the final member responsible for gathering intel, spoke up. Kazekage-sama, while investigating the Land of Grass, we came across another interesting rumor. It's about a legendary artifact said to have been left behind by the Sage of Six Paths, the Box of Ultimate Bliss. Rasa paused. He knew that name. A relic that had appeared in a certain timeline, a so-called treasure of the Sage of Six Paths. He wasn't particularly concerned about it now, but... Interesting. Keep investigating. He turned his gaze toward the rest of the team. In the future, if you uncover anything like this, any legends, artifacts, or secrets, report them to me immediately. After all, even though Rasa had knowledge of the future, there were always details that could slip through the cracks. Yes, Kazekage-sama. Good. With their objectives clear, the 13 shinobi vanished into the forest, moving toward Kazekage. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 4. Peace.